Hello everyone and welcome to your Patreon exclusive episode for the month of December 2024. My name, of course, is NBZ, and, Bally's still not here. He's just jolling about, doing something about parenting or something like that. Who knows? Just up all night, not sleeping, which, he gets enough naps, I think, in the rest of his life that it should kind of make up for it at this point in time, but I'm sure he's doing just fine and dandy. But I'm not alone this time on this episode, because I'm joined here by some special guests indeed. First of all, we're joined by across the pond, it's the morning for him, evening for us, is Devon. Hello, Devon. How's it going?
It's going great. It's going great. Happy to be here, as always.
Absolutely, yeah. Always down to do a top 10 list, which, spoilers,
Absolutely.
is kind of what we're going to be doing today. Also joined by another friend of the show, Matt Lorrigan. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you. Also very happy to be doing a top 10 list. It's been ages since I've done like an official top 10, not just like making them up myself. So this will be nice.
Yeah, always good fun. I was going to say, I always refer to Matt Lorrigan as Matt Lorrigan's like full name, and is that because your online handle is your second name and then you always have it out there? But I don't know, it's one of those, maybe it's like a brand thing, right?
It's
I feel
branding,
like saying
baby.
it in in full, it just works in full,
It does.
So I appreciate that.
There's very few other Matt Lorrigans, so it's genuinely quite useful whenever if someone says it, it's like, well, that's that guy. Like,
I guess I mean, Matt is a relatively common name, I would say.
Yeah, but if you
so...
Google Matt Lorrigan, that front page is all me. All me.
That's it.
That's because of this
that's
very
that Blue
reason.
Sky link. Everyone's going to follow you now.
You monopolized the Matt Lorrigan market.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I do kill off all the other Matt Lorrigans, but don't cut that out, obviously. But that's just between us.
Great stuff. We're here, and I was like, okay, what should we do for a December show? And I was like, people like top 10 lists, and I was like, well, I can't do my top 10 list because Bally would kill me if I did those without him. We got to do our episode to save those for January. So I was like, I have a cunning plan. I'm going to ask these two gentlemen to bring some top 10 lists, and then I'll bring a top 10 list, which is technically one, but we'll discuss what it actually is. So Matt, you have brought a top 10 list of everyone's favorite Goatee T Dakota, as everyone knows well on this show, games of the year that didn't actually come out this year. How did you find the process of putting your list together?
It was really fascinating because I've not really been paying attention to what I've been playing, if that makes sense. I say that I've been tracking it, but it was only when I did this and I was like, okay, let me write down all of the games that I played this year that didn't actually come out this year, and that list is about 25 games long. Like,
oh wow, okay,
more than half
a lot of old games
stuff,
this year.
Yeah, more than half the stuff I played this year has been stuff from previous years. I've been really enjoying like playing like some really old school stuff, some stuff from like just a couple of years ago. Like I've been playing catch up a lot, and less brand new stuff this year. So yeah, it was nice. Like I actually had to really cut it down into a top 10. I wasn't scrambling or anything, which has been a fun place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that also you do the thing where you're like, oh man, I'm going to play this entire series in whole, which I respect greatly. You're like, all right, Pikmin 4's coming out. Let me play every Pikmin before it comes out, which I think is very respectable, which is very cool. Devon, your list is slightly different. What's your list all about?
So my list... First of all, I want to say I respect that a ton, because whenever there's a game in a series coming out that I'm like, oh, I want to play this, but, I didn't play the NES game or Famicom game or whatever, so how am I going to understand the story? Like, I've done that recently.
Devon, how are we going to play all the entire Ys series if we don't start at the original Ys game?
That's what I've been doing, and so I did the same thing with Final Fantasy this year, actually, which unfortunately is not on my list, but I started playing 1 and got to 2, and eventually I'll work my way through. But I rarely have the motivation to see that through, so kudos to you if you're actually able to go through all the games in a series.
It's mad. I've only ever done it once, and I did it with the Yakuza games. That was start from the beginning, go through all of them chronologically, which held up very well, and I enjoyed doing that. I've kind of bounced around with stuff like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. I did play Final Fantasy 1, which I really enjoyed. I played the GBA version, the Dawn of Souls edition, which I think is probably the best way to play those original Final Fantasy games. So I don't know, Devon, if you played those or played the Pixel remasters.
I've been playing the Pixel. I played through all of, didn't grace my list unfortunately, but Final Fantasy 1 Pixel Remaster was a way better experience of a video game than I expected it to be. It held up surprisingly well. Obviously, it's one of those games you can see the 80s-isms too, but it's very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
anyway.
I really enjoyed it a great deal. It's it's very good. But yes, your list.
Yeah.
Explain your list to people.
So it starts a little bit with you, because you sent me at the beginning of this year, I believe. I don't remember the YouTube creator, so apology. You might, but the backlog video, it was like working through your backlog.
Daryl Talks Games, right?
Yes, yeah. And I ended up starting the year doing the whole Google Sheet spreadsheet thing, saying like, all right, these are all the games I want to play. This is what I want to do. And then I did that for one game, and then didn't do it the rest of the year.
Okay.
But I'd actually
well, you tried.
I did try. I'd like to go back to it for 2025, because I think similar to you, Matt, especially the past several months, I've really kind of felt like I don't know. I've been going back to lots of older games, in particular JRPGs and things like that, and in the crazy real world times we're feeling, going back to something like comforting like that, and just, I don't know, game design player first has been great. But I didn't feel comfortable enough doing a top 10 with that. So I had a different spirit with my list, which was sort of, it's a top 10 games of 2024, in that these were the 10 games that I hadn't played, or hadn't played a lot of before this year, that meant a lot. So there's a mixture. It's about half and half of new games that came out this year and some older titles.
Okay.
So it'll be fun. It'll be interesting.
Very good. That's really cool, and interested to hear how it goes down. So my list is it's my 20 to 11. So this is my goatee to Dakoti for the games that are not going to make the cut for the top 10 games, which I thought was quite interesting, because going through this list, I found that a lot of these I actually haven't really talked about that much on shows. They're usually ones that kind of got relegated because I played them and they didn't have time on a show, or just like wasn't the opportunity, or I finished them like at a point that didn't make sense to talk about them. And some of them are like games that you almost don't finish, and so I never really had a window to talk about them. So I think there's going to be some interesting stuff on here that people haven't necessarily heard me talk about either. So I think that's covers a good basis. But I think the format's going to be relatively simple. We're basically just going to go 10 to 1, and we'll go around in a circle. So we'll do our number 10s, then we'll do our number 9s, and count down until we get to the number 1, or the number 11 in my case, but we'll just pretend it's number 1. So let's kick things off. Matt, do you want to go first? What is your number 10 game of the year that didn't come out this year?
Yeah, my number 10, goatee T Dakoti, I think that's right, is
that's correct, yes.
Technically a goatee T Dakoti, but it's also could be a goatee by itself.
Okay.
And that is the original Tomb Raider game on the PS1,
wow,
which I
played
through the Tomb Raider 1 to 3 remastered collection that came out this year.
Right, yeah.
Came out, yeah.
Which I found to be an absolutely fascinating game to play. Like, it's here on account of its being interesting more than it being, like, good, if that makes sense.
Enjoyable? Yeah, I was going to ask that,
Sure.
right? Because I do think that, like, when I think back on Tomb Raider, and I played a bunch when I was younger, Tomb Raider 3 specifically, and I was like, I am just bad at video games. And then I grew up, and I tried playing those games again, and I was like, no, they were in fact bad as video games. But, yeah, very interested to hear your take on this, because it's basically stopped me from going back to them, because I feel like they just feel quite archaic in a way.
They do, but what I found really fascinating about them is they have their design ethos, which I've very rarely seen anywhere else, which is that it's platforming, it's slow platforming. So it's like the antithesis to everything that you love, MBZ. Like, it is, it is the polar opposite of that. But it is platforming that is built around squares and a sort of like a square grid system. And every jump in that game is built around the fact that you can jump from a standing position, which sends you a certain distance, or you can jump from a run-up, which sends you from a certain distance. And a run-up is always one square long. So you back yourself up a square, and then you do a run and you go. And this sounds bad, but every level is built around it. And it creates this really interesting platforming where you have to think about everything that you're doing. You sort of have to line up every jump. And in that sense, it does create this almost immersion. It's how you would tackle a tomb or a dungeon in real life way more than it is in a game where you're constantly you're running, you're jumping, you know that you're going to stop on a dime, so you don't have to worry about like falling off the edge. And Tomb Raider pairs that platforming with genuinely really good level design, really clever sort of levels that wind around on themselves with some really good puzzles. And I think one of the most interesting things is a lot of people, I think, growing up played Tomb Raider 2 and 3. More people I know remember Tomb Raider 2 and 3 than they do the first game. And I think those have actually aged worse because those lean in way more into combat. There's a lot more enemies. Enemies take longer to kill. Levels that tend to be built around combat a little bit more. And so I've nearly finished Tomb Raider 2, but I found that game a much bigger struggle to go through than the first Tomb Raider because it has changed its design philosophy a little bit, and it's tried to make it more into a shooter, but without changing any of the gameplay mechanics. So they're much harder games to play. But the first one, genuinely, it starts you out pretty slow. It gives you a lot of levels early on where you can really take your time. You're not in any real danger of losing quite badly, and alongside that, it has some really cool level concepts, like the fact you meet a T-Rex within the first hour of Tomb Raider, and it still holds up to this day. Genuinely, it's really cool to be in. There's a water level that feels very Ocarina of Time. Like the water dungeon, it has that similar sort of design ethos in terms of raising water levels. It really plays around with being a 3D space.
Interesting.
And yeah, I had a really good time with that first Tomb Raider game. And it goes to some quite dark, weird places from a story point of view as well. The end of the game, you're in Atlantis, which I think most people would picture Atlantis a certain way. Yeah, I mean, it's where Uncharted gets its sort of supernatural slant from. All the Uncharted games end up being something weird and supernatural, and that always comes from the Tomb Raider games. That's where that sort of started. Obviously, that comes from Indiana Jones. They pull from the same place.
It all comes. Yeah.
But me saying Atlantis to you, you're picturing something in particular, but the Tomb Raider version of Atlantis is a weird meat palace full of mutated meat monsters, and all the walls are sort of alive and breathing and humming, and it's all covered in red meat and blood. And I was playing it, and I was like, "This." I've genuinely still not played anything that's really like it. It's really cool in that sense. It's got some slightly weird horror vibes towards the end, which I wasn't expecting, and it is a really cool little twist on it. And playing the first one especially, it made it really obvious to me why this game hit, and why it was it was one of those games that I remember it was a little bit beyond my time, but it felt like a game that an adult would play for you. You'd play it for a little bit and you're like, I can't do this, I need to hand this over to someone else. So it was quite cool being the adult and working it out and working my way through it. And yeah, I had a really good time with it in the end.
That's awesome.
I would recommend this one genuinely over Tomb Raider 2 or 3 if you were going to jump back into them, because it does. Those games feel like sequels that were made in an era where it went, okay, people have played Tomb Raider 1, they've gotten really good at it, we were going to make this one harder for them.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Yeah, really good time with it.
Just ratchet everything up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Did you mainly play with the original visual stuff, or because I know the remake had these issues where they changed textures, but the textures didn't account for some of the gameplay elements. There would be a rushing river, but the texture wouldn't show you that, and so you'd go into it and you'd be like, oh, why am I suddenly falling down? All that. I heard some kind of negative things about some of the retexturing that went on with it.
Yeah, I flicked back and forth a lot, I will say, because the new stuff looked really good in some places. There were areas where you're like, oh, this is beautiful with the new textures, but there was a weird issue. I think it got patched out by the time I'd finished the game, but keys in the game, which are really big chunky keys in the original, were absolutely tiny with the remake visuals. So sometimes you'd be running around being like, I can't find this thing that I need, and you'd switch to the original visuals and you'd be like, oh, there it is. And yeah, I was literally switching between them every couple of minutes, because it was that thing of being like, oh, this is what the original intent was, and then this is what the new one looks like. So that was a bit more, but I did only play with the original tank controls. They added in non-tank controls, and they just don't work because the game is so heavily built around this sort of this tank controls. Yeah. The updated ones don't really work for it at all.
Well, yeah, you definitely opened my eyes a little bit, and made me curious. I mean, probably not curious enough to try, because I just know my taste enough that I know that I will get to it, and I'll be like, fuck this game, you know? Like, I feel like my my patience level is a little bit lower for it, but you know, I think I respect it more having heard you talk about it, so I really do appreciate that. Devon, what is your number 10?
Sure. And by the way, so my list it's not really ranked. It's just sort of a collection. I'm going like, so I've got 5 2024, 5 non-2024, going like, you know, alternating here. So the first one is a bit of a twofer. The first one I have Resident Evil 4, and I played both the original Resident Evil 4, the 2005 game, along with the remake from last year.
Nice.
So I initially played the original Resident Evil 4 on my Steam Deck. I played with the Fan HD mod, which, if anyone is curious about going back and playing the OG RE4, the Fan HD texture pack mod is like outstanding. I mean, it looks incredible. They did a wonderful, wonderful job with that. And that's to say that Resident Evil 4 is already a pretty incredible looking game for 2005. Like, there's not many games from that era that have held up as well visually. And I think more importantly, there are not too many games from that era that have held up as well gameplay-wise as well. You know, people like to sort of point to games like RE4 as sort of modernizing third-person shooters and revolutionizing them in a way. And there's absolutely a little bit more archaic elements. Like, there's light tank controls in that game, which I remember when I tried to play that game years ago, I couldn't because of the tank controls. But if you just sit down for about, you know, 10-20 minutes and try to wrap your head around them, it sort of clicks. There's a moment where those tank controls click, and then it's I don't know how to describe parts of this without having played if you haven't played RE4, but the original RE4 is so like deliberately designed around those controls and exactly what Leon can do and how he can move, and the enemy design corresponds with that perfectly. Like you know, it's much more of an action game than a lot of other games in the series, but the horror elements almost more have to do with when you've got, you know, 4 or 5 enemies coming towards you and your movement options are limited, and it's about like what you can do to get out of that situation. And you know, there were things that were revolutionary at the time, like shooting a zombie's leg or something to like make it so they can't come to you as quickly. The combat is just outstanding in that game. I didn't understand why people said it for so long, but now that I've played it, I totally see it. It feels like an arcade game in the best way. Like the sort of combat flow. You haven't played RE4, right, NBZ?
Well, yes. I think this comes down to like my I don't play horror games thing, right? Which I feel like RE4 has this reputation, and I feel like I don't know how horror you guys would kind of categorize it as, but it also, because it's an older game now, it feels like it would be easier to go back to. And also, you talking about it on Steam Deck is like, if I can play a horror game or like a slightly scary game on a handheld, it's always going to reduce that kind of intensity for me. And so I have, you know, I've had RE4 on my Switch wish list for years, and like I've been thinking like one day I should probably get around to it, but I don't know. It's it always has that slight barrier, that slight intimidation for me, but you know.
I would say go Steam Deck and try to get the HD mod, because I ended up getting that whole mod set up on my Steam Deck, and it ran perfectly after a little bit of fiddling. The sort of combat flow in that game is, it's like you want to try to shoot the enemy in the head, stun them, you run up, you hit X to do the classic roundhouse kick, and then you pull out your knife and like aim towards the ground and knife them. And it sounds simple, but like that is the main combat flow, and it is more of like an arcade game than anything. And upgrading your weapons is a lot of fun. You sort of You create a Lodo as it goes. RE4 is lovely. It's wonderful. And the remake, I'll touch on a little bit. I feel like I have less to say about the remake, to be honest. And that's not to discredit it. They did a phenomenal job with it. First of all, visually, it looks awesome. I mean, that whole RE engine Capcom has developed has clearly paid off.
Dude, it's insane.
It's insane, and like in my experience, it runs well on a variety of different hardware. Whether it's the
seamless, I remember like launch day of Devil May Cry 5, I had my older PC with the 970 in it, and I was like running at max settings. I was like flawless frame rate. It's a mad engine. They've done magic with that.
No, I played a little bit of the RE2 remake on my Steam Deck at the beginning of this year, and that ran pretty flawlessly. It wasn't a perfect 60, but for the most part, it did hit 60, which is impressive for that game, because that's another a game that's looks great visually. I think it's held up well. A lot of the combat changes smart. I kind of miss some of the arcadiness of the original, but it is smart. I think the most impressive stuff in that is the story, which is crazy because the story in the original is like a B action movie in both the best and worst ways, and they made it like a little bit more serious and a little bit more personal. Ashley is not like a cartoon character anymore. She's like a little bit more of a real person, which is lovely to see. By the way, it's been a thing on the internet for forever where people complain about Ashley. She is not that bad gameplay wise in the original. It is very
okay. All right.
It's not nearly like people complain about escort missions from that era, Metal Gear Solid 2 as well. This sounds terrible, but with Ashley, there's a mechanic where you can have her hide in a dumpster.
Yep.
And if you do that, you really don't have to worry about her.
They just can't get her at
that
point.
God.
No, they
wow.
can't.
Okay.
It's purely. I think purely it's the Leon helpline from that game that has made people think that, because
it's like Navi, right, in Ocarina.
Yes.
Sort of.
Yeah. 100%.
But regardless, a lot of smart changes. Some of the voice acting stuff, I was kind of a little bit like nervous going into, because as like ridiculous and cheesy as some of the voice acting is in the original, I mean, it's wonderful. Like the game opens with Leon talking, the line like, "Where did everybody go? Bingo!" And how are they gonna pull that off in a 2023 game? But I will say they did quite a good job. I think if you're curious like me, it really is worth going back to that 2005 game, because it has held up surprisingly well. But if you only want to play one and you want to go...
no, I was going to say that a lot of people were saying, like, why are they remaking RE4? Like, everyone's like, oh, it's perfect already. It's like the one that doesn't really need that treatment. So I think, given what you've said about it here, but also like what everyone else has said about it, it's held up remarkably well.
Yeah, no, it's one of the strangest remakes I've played in a way, because, you generally have remakes that fall into one or two camps, right? Like, oh, this is a replace. Why would you go back to the original kind of thing? Like, I don't know why my mind jumped to this, but, Metroid Zero Mission, for example. Like, why are you going to go back? Sorry for all the Metroid NES diehard fans.
I did.
They don't listen to this.
They're wrong. Unfortunately, they are wrong in this situation. Yeah,
they are. Like, why would you go back to that when you have just a game that's in basically every measurable aspect in improvement? Or you have, remakes like, I remember the original, I think Silent Hill is on my mind because, that just got a remake. The original Silent Hill re-releases on Xbox 360 were like broken, and everybody preferred the PS2 releases. The RE4 remake it's not a complete replace, but it's also an upgrade in a lot of ways. I think it sort of stands next to the 2005 version in a really interesting way. So there's not really a wrong answer for which version of the game to play. They're both great.
Agreed. Yeah, they're fantastic. I played through the RE4 remake 6 times when I was writing the trophy guide.
Jesus Christ! Oh wow. Yeah, I think I remember you mentioning that. Yeah.
It's a big one. I think that game's phenomenal. But like you say, it doesn't supersede the original. Like they're both so good. And the arcade mode, like the arcadiness of the original, it makes that Mercenaries mode so good in that game, because it basically does turn it into an arcade game, and it's incredible how well that the gameplay of it transfers into what is an arcade game.
Yeah.
Great stuff. I have my number 10, and it's a game that is a little less lower profile than these two that have been brought up so far. Mine is a small independent game that came out last year called Birth, from a developer called Madison Carr. I played her first game, Landlord of the Woods, a couple of years ago, and I listened to a podcast called .zip, which is basically a show that talks about short games, like games you can finish within like a couple of hours or so, which is a very nice thing. So it obviously encourages me to like play some short games and kind of play those along with it. And I've been meaning to play this for quite a while. And Birth is basically a kind of point and click game, a narrative game, where you play as this kind of almost these wooden characters. They're almost like made of wood, but they're very kind of like they're skeletal, right? They're almost like they're all made of like they're like deer skeletons and like animal skeletons and stuff like that. And it's very kind of like curious in its approach, where you are opening windows and doors and kind of exploring the street, and you're kind of entering these spaces and like clicking on these weird objects and like sorts of strange kind of almost surrealist stuff going on, where, you know, you'll open up this thing and it's like pour these different little things into a jar to like make them all line up, and then you'll get this reward. And the reward is like the whole premise of the game is that you're kind of creating a friend for yourself. You're like getting all these parts, all these pieces, and you're basically gonna create someone who's gonna basically stay with you. And really the game, like narratively, from kind of like a metaphorical perspective, comes down to like being someone in a new city who's like kind of alone and doesn't know anybody, and you kind of get that sense of like community by going into all these spaces and interacting with different people, but then also like that idea of, you know, collecting this kind of like way of making yourself feel a bit more whole, which I thought was very well done. It's very short, and you know, doesn't overstay its welcome, but has really phenomenal art design and just very nice kind of like the way that you interact with objects and click on them, and the way that they all kind of move around, I think is very good and very smart stuff, which I very much enjoyed, and feels kind of a good step up from Landlord of the Woods, which had kind of some macabre elements to it as well, and like there's kind of like a, you know, a bit of a dark humor to these games as well. I also recently found out that Madison Carr, I don't think she's married to Billy Basso, but I think she's in a relationship with Billy Basso, who made Animal Well this year as well. So two very talented game developers out there. So yeah, I'd recommend people check out Birth. It's a very cool little independent game that came out, and I enjoyed it greatly. So that's my number 10.
Nice.
Should we go back to Matt for number 9?
My number 9 is Unpacking.
Ooh, okay. Interesting.
Which is one of those ones where it was like, I felt like I was playing catch-up a little bit when I got to it. It was a game that was talked about really heavily when it first came out, and it's been on Game Pass for like a while now, and so I was like, you know what, I'll finally get to Unpacking. I think I had like an afternoon off work, and I'd heard it was like a 3 to 4 hour game, and I was like, fine, I'll get into it. And I've read all the think pieces, and I've seen the things. It's like, you know, you follow the story of a person, but you never meet this person, but you follow their life. And I always was a little bit skeptical of how like obvious that stuff would be. And playing it, I was absolutely astounded how like subtly it teaches you about this person's life over time, and how much of a connection it gives you to them. It really builds a bond with just someone, and you get to see their relationships with people, and seemingly like their relationships with sexuality as well, and you get to see good moments of their lives and bad moments of their lives. And I think it's the one that everyone talks about, but there's the particular room that you move into in Unpacking, where you're seemingly moving into a new boyfriend's flat, and there's just no room for your character whatsoever. You can't fit anything anywhere. You're just sort of trying to like get a little bit of your personality on top of all of his stuff, and it was really quite moving. It had an impact that I wasn't expecting, and for it to do all of that while also having this really lovely, satisfying, almost Tetris-esque gameplay of like slotting things together and going like, oh, that works, and that goes there, and knowing that there's in some areas there's obvious places for things, but in other ways you can sort of put your own personality on it. But I didn't realise that until after I finished it. My wife played through it, and I watched her for a lot of it, and seeing how she completely tackled things in a different way made me realise that you can really do that in the way that you want to. And yeah, just a really delightful little game. It felt like a proper achievement from a small team, and just like a bit of a cheat, but to mention like another game that I played, I also played a similar game, which is A Little to the Left.
Yes, I also played that this year.
Yes, you did. I'm sure I remember you talking about it on the podcast, and I just didn't have as nice a time with A Little to the Left, and it made me realise how well Unpacking did what it did. Playing something that was sort of, you know, tackling a lot of the same puzzle types and a lot of the same sort of like thematic things, and just not quite nailing it in the same way that Unpacking does. I just thought it was a really...
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
What with the Little to the Left stuff?
Yeah, I was going to say that Little to the Left to me feels like it was very much a kind of stitched together set of puzzles as opposed to a cohesive kind of narrative experience that Unpacking is, where Unpacking is like, you know, the puzzles are almost a means to an end. They're all like the act of kind of like putting things into place is a way for you to engage with the narrative the game is trying to get across. And I think, again, it is, you know, my favorite thing in games is like a story that can only be told through the art of games itself, and the process of doing what you do in Unpacking leads to those kind of revelations, which I think are so satisfying. I think ultimately A Little to the Left leans more on the puzzle side of stuff. I definitely found myself getting more frustrated with the puzzles, and because there wasn't really a narrative hook there, I also felt like I was less engaged with it generally. So I think of these two types of games, I think they're both become very popular, and, you know, for good reasons, in terms of like the satisfaction of like moving things around and putting things neatly in place. I think Unpacking for me is the one that kind of like is a little bit of a step above, just because of that kind of story that it tells.
Yeah, absolutely. You've actually hit the nail on the head and think like you couldn't do that in not a game. It was a story that could only be told through that medium and was elevated by being a game, which is wicked. Like so often, like especially in the AAA space, games and their stories are almost like in combat with each other. Like, I mean, it's an old school phrase, isn't it? The ludonarrative dissonance. It's gone out of fashion a little bit, yeah. But Unpacking is the antithesis to that, really. Like, it is a game that whose
ludonarrative coherence.
Hey, that's the one. That's the one. Oh, that's good. Let's use that. Let's make that a thing.
Let's use it. Yeah.
I think Unpacking's wicked. It's a great little accomplishment and a cracking game.
Excellent. Devon, moving on. What is your number 9 game?
Yes, I should check out Unpacking. I had not heard of that before. You guys just talked about it. It looks delightful. I see this sentiment online, and just like talking with my friends sometimes, it sounds like you two feel the same way. It's incredible how every year I get older, every time I hear, 5-hour game, sign me up. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh yes, I love my my 100-hour RPGs and whatever, but I also very much appreciate a tight little package like that. So my number 6, speaking of RPGs, is number 9 is
I was gonna say, yeah, we're jumping ahead.
Yeah.
I said 6 because, like I said, I'm alternating here between pre-24 and 24 games, and I have them chronologically. Anyway, so next up for me is and also sort of a 2021 game, but Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. I picked this up on sale pretty recently because I had just been... I don't know what came over me, but I was like, I need to play a JRPG right now. I need like a gameplay focused.
Sometimes it just happens, just hits you. You're just like, I just
absolutely.
Need it. It's time.
And listen, I love Western RPGs. There's lots of outstanding Western RPGs, but there's something so comforting about the formula of a JRPG. It unlocks something in my brain. I don't know. And SMT5 is for sure it does. Have either of you played SMT5 or no?
No, I've got my eye on it, but I'd love to get to it.
Yeah, I've never touched an SMT game. Again, big Persona boy over here, so I do like Atlas stuff, but I've always been a story over gameplay person with Atlas stuff. Metaphor kind of changed me on that, because Metaphor was like fantastic from a combat perspective and like really thoroughly enjoyed it, and has made me think, like, because the system in that game is similar to some SMT stuff, that maybe I should jump in and give that stuff a go, because it's very satisfying.
Right. Yeah, no, I know you love Metaphor. I'd imagine that's probably going to be on your 1 through 10 and not 11 through 20
oh yes
list. But so the combat wise, for someone who's played Persona but never played SMT, think of it like it's sort of the inverse, where your protagonist in Persona, right, is the super customizable character, because you have all the demons that you can swap in and out of, and it's your remaining 3 party members that are a little bit more static. It's the opposite, where your protagonist is the character that, like, you decide a build for, strength, magic, whatever, and then it's your other 3 party members that are the demons, so they're super customizable. And it's the same fusion mechanic as in the Persona series, where you can fuse 2 demons, or in certain instances more than 2 demons together. You can carry over different skills and elemental attacks and things like that. So it's very much, it's similar to Pokemon in some ways, if that makes any sense, where it's that monster collecting itch, but also like, oh, how can I make my creature like better? What skills can I put on it to really give me an advantage in battle? So the combat system is stellar. It's the same SMT combat system that you know and love. The biggest difference between SMT and Persona, at least SMT 5, is instead of doing the all-out attack, it gives you an extra turn, which I kind of think is a little bit more interesting, because there's not as much, at least in my opinion, there's not as much decision making in a game like Persona 5, where you hit the elemental weakness with everybody, you knock all the enemies down. You have the option to do the all-out attack. Why would you ever not do the all-out attack? It's a binary decision that's not even really a decision. You just, yes, this is what you would do here.
Yes.
Where in Shin Megami Tensei, if you hit a weakness, you fill up. You have 4 little circles on the top of your screen, and if you hit a weakness, that circle lights up, so you can use another ability. Where it makes it interesting, because you might have a character or a demon who's like a healer, that's their primary role, but on the first turn you want to use an attack to hit a weakness, even if it doesn't do much damage, so you can light up that circle and get another attack. It's really, really cool. I love the combat system in that game, and on top of it, the exploration is outstanding. Vengeance, from what a lot of people have said, I actually played a little bit of the original 5, but kind of fell off of it. Vengeance sort of improves things story-wise. It adds some human party members that you can have, which for some reason was not in the original SMT5. A lot of that is very cool. But it is a much more gameplay-focused experience than something like Persona. And half of that gameplay is the battles, as I was discussing, and the other half is the exploration, where you're in sort of a post-apocalyptic, like, hell version of Tokyo. And I don't know, it's the way I described it to you, because I think I was messaging you about this game, NVZ. The way I would describe SMT5 is it's not quite open world, it's more open zone, where you have these sort of very explicitly designed, like, level design. It's like there is an A to B path that you need to go, but there's a bunch of different branching paths and like side quests and things that you can go and explore outside of the main zone. And there is, I don't know, there's something just super satisfying about like unlocking these hidden parts of the map, and maybe finding a demon that you might not have until later on, or getting a specific item or like a stat booster. It really, I don't know. I think most people who play games, like, there is that itch of exploration and like finding something that feels like a secret, and SMT5 hits that like pretty consistently throughout its runtime. That's sort of it's the marrying of those two gameplay styles that is what really makes the game work for me. So I'm loving it. I'm not finished with it yet. I think I'm about half to 2/3 of the way through. I've been playing another
So
RPG.
like 70 hours, right? Yeah, that sounds
no, you know what? It's SMT5, you go to how long to beat? It's like 45 hours, which I think is
that's not bad.
It's a pretty good length for an RPG.
That's the best sell I've ever heard about it.
I know, right?
yeah, Matt's just buying it now based on that alone. Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, I've always wanted to get into SMT game, and I think like we're at this point now with Atlas and like their modern.
Give it a shot when it goes on sale.
Yeah, absolutely. So the modern stuff feels like definitely a bit more approachable. Because I know how hardcore the reputation is for SMT generally, but I think I think I bought SMT 4 on 3DS before that store shut down, so I do have some,
before the eShop closures.
Before the eShop closed, yeah. So I bought a bunch of Etrian Odyssey games as well. I just spent a bunch of money, and so I'll play with those eventually. I'll get around to them. Anyway, very exciting. My number 9 is a game that I did talk about on the show called Fist, Forged in Shadow Torch. So I think this is interesting because, just talked about Little to the Left. And I think a game like Little to the Left, I think for most people, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's a better game than Fist, Forged in Shadow Torch, right? I think this is where personal kind of preference comes into things, where like, so I played Little to the Left this year, and it's not in my top 20, right? So it's not on this list. And I recognize that Little to the Left is probably a better game than Fist, Forged and Shadow Torch. This game, you play a rabbit with a giant fist, and it's anthropomorphic. It's like this noir setting. It's kind of sick, to be honest. But like the cutscenes are incredibly like jank. The storytelling is like, it's weird and kind of bad. Like there's this kind of cat character who's like really badly sexualized, and just, I don't know, the writing is not very good. And like when you play it, like it doesn't feel amazing. The dash like is good, but it doesn't have animation to it really. It's just like, oh, it just happens, and like it's actually kind of fine from a gameplay perspective. But I think this is the year where I was like, I'm just going to play Metroidvanias that are on my hit list that I haven't got around to, and it just like I've said it a couple of times, but a 4 out of 10 Metroidvania, or like a 6 out of 10 Metroidvania, you just give it an extra 2 points for me, basically. It just becomes that. And I would call Fist like a 6 out of 10 Metroidvania, but in my heart, it's like an 8, right? Because I just love the loop so much. And I think playing a lot of those this year has just given me a different perspective on like, I just really like this loop. I sit there and I just play it, and I get super into it. And I think the cool thing about it is like there's a bunch of different weapons you get. So you get the fist, and then you get a giant drill that you use that then also doubles as a kind of like hover thing. So like, you go through wind tunnels, and your drill suddenly becomes this hover thing that like lets you fly through the wind tunnels. You get this like electric whip, which was very good, and I ended up using for like most of the boss fights. I'd say the boss fights are maybe the highlight of this game. They're fucking difficult, like incredibly hard, like challenging gauntlets that you just like play again and again, and you're just like trying to remember the pattern and just all the different moves that they have. And it gets to that point of like you get completely killed very quickly, almost in a From Software game kind of way. Like I had some similar vibes with this game where I would go into boss fights, and then by the end of them I would be taking no hits, and I would not even be using my health charges because I just memorized the patterns so well. And I think that is very satisfying. I think it's obviously a reason why those games succeed so well, is people feel that kind of overcoming of things. And I think overall it's competent, it's well made. It's a weird world, and I think it has a bit of charm to it. It has that jank charm, but like filling out the map is satisfying. I think the map is well designed in terms of like giving you good fast travel points and allowing you to kind of get back to where you want to be, and explore and map it out if you want to. But yeah, I think it's I would recommend it to people like me, basically. I would say if you're not a Metroidvania person, don't worry about it. There's lots of good ones out there. There's loads of amazing ones. This year especially, right, with Prince of Persia and a bunch of other stuff. So do play those. But if you're not deep into this shit, then I don't think Fist Forge and Shadow Torch is for you. But if you know, you know. So there you go. It ends up on my list.
You know what it looks like a little bit to me? I'm looking at this game on the Steam page right now, and I don't even necessarily mean this as like a diss. This is a bit of a compliment. It looks like a game that you would have found on Xbox Live Arcade back in the day.
100%.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it is. It is such a 360 era downloadable game.
Yes.
Although some of those were quite high quality, like the Strider game, the Strider Metroidvania that came out in that era, that game's fucking fantastic. It's really good. And like even games like Outlast, that was the Outland is the Ubisoft one where it takes the whole like bullet switching
the blue and red one. That game
system.
was cool. Yeah,
the blue and red one. Yeah.
I remember Splosion Man.
Or even like Hell Yeah,
Splosion Man,
the Rabbit. There's a bunch from that era, lots of Metroidvania. So this fits very squarely in that vibe. You're totally correct. It's absolutely one of those. And so if you have nostalgia for that stuff, I think you'd have a great time with this. Honestly, it's a downloadable game. So
I was
there you go.
I was writing Games News when this was announced, and I remember getting the press release for it and being like, how did anyone sign off on the name Fist Forged in Shadow Torch? Like,
it is a nightmare.
But that's part of the charm of something like that, right? That's almost like that's almost the jank that this game would never. Yeah. That name would never get through a AAA publisher.
No.
But whoever's making it, when this is what it's being called, Forged in Shadow Torch. Are we going to tell anyone what Shadow Torch is before they play it? No. You're gonna have to work that out. Like it's really really fascinating one. Like it's a work backwards, right? We're calling this game Fist.
Yes.
How do we make those letters work?
Right. Yeah. They definitely came up with that first.
Yeah. 100%. I've always been fascinated to play this one though. It's got, like you say, it's got a weird sort of like interesting visual style. The character design, like very not of this era, which I kind of love. It does, like you say, it feels like something from a different era. So yeah, I do want to get to this at some point. It needs to be added to my wish list. Yeah,
I got it for free through the Epic giveaways. There's so many of those games on Epic that they're just like, here, have this for free every week. And so I had been meaning to play it, and I think the hard thing about it is like I prefer Metroidvania's handheld, and it wasn't running on my Steam Deck through that stuff, so I was like, well, I have to sit down at a computer and play this, and I think that's always a hard sell for me when it comes to these types of games. So but I did commit to it finally, and I did get through it. So it's cool. So check it out if you are a sicko like me.
Yeah, that's the one disappointing part about the Epic giveaways to me, because there's plenty of games that I get that it's like, man, I should check this out, but if it's not on a handheld, like I don't know.
Yeah, it makes it a lot harder. Absolutely. Lovely. All right, number 8, Matt. What do we got?
So we have got Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, which
hell yeah,
is going to be a slightly controversial one. So a little bit of background here is that I love the Paper Mario games, like absolutely adore them, and by the Paper Mario games I mean Paper Mario and Paper Mario the 1000 Year Door. I like
all two.
There's a lot of games.
What do you mean? There aren't any other games in the series? Those are the only two, right?
Well, there's the remaster now. There's the remake.
Exactly.
Oh, sure. Yes, of course. Yeah, the remake. You're right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, so that's the thing. So I played through 1000 Year Door when the remaster came out earlier this year. Loved it all over again. Prompted me to finally play the Super Mario RPG remake.
The remake,
as well.
yeah.
Yes.
So got around to that. And then, I think shortly after I did that, Brotherhood was announced. And I was like, cool. You know what? I'm on a Mario RPG kick. Why not go and do Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga? And that's on NSO, I believe. So I had a run through that. I had a really lovely time with it. And I was just like, well, let's keep this going. You know, we talked earlier about my playthrough sort of addiction.
Yes. Yes.
So I went on to play Mario and Luigi Partners in Time and Bowser's Inside Story, and the general consensus is that both Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story are better than Partners in Time.
Yeah.
but I had the most fun with Partners in Time by like a long way.
Wow!
Interesting.
Oh my god! Okay.
I'm not even sure why. I think for one, I love the DS. I love the Nintendo DS so much, and sort of jumping back into that was a big thing. And it's a slightly less chatty game than something like Bowser's Inside Story. I think Superstar Saga does this pretty well as well. Like Partners in Time and Superstar Saga, they're better at not just constantly talking at you. I think it's something that even the Brothership reviews were talking about for that game, and it was a big problem with Dream Team back in the day. But they're much more willing to let you discover stuff yourself. You have long periods of gameplay where you're just doing combat and trying to complete your objective. But the weird big thing for me that I loved about Partners in Time is that the top screen of it is a map. And it shows you exactly sort of basically where you need to go. And it shows you like the direct path, and it shows you the path that will have, you know, it's not a path that you're going to take the main path, but it'll have all the items that you find and the little bits off to the side. And it made that game such a breeze to play through compared to the other Mario and Luigi games that I played. I found Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story to be a little bit of a slog compared to it, and Partners in Time just flew by. And I really liked the 4-button combat as well. So going from Superstar Saga, which was just an A and B button, A is Mario, B is Luigi. Partners in Time adds Baby Luigi and Baby Mario, and it makes combat genuinely really quite intense. Like pulling off some of the special abilities is like really difficult, and then when you do it, you're like, I've absolutely nailed this.
It's a really challenging game, especially. So I played it when I was like, I don't know, 14 at the time, and I remember like having a lot of trouble with those inputs to make them all work, because it's quite a lot to keep track of, basically, with the 4 different characters at once.
100%. But I found sort of overcoming that to be quite a satisfying experience. And just in general, I really liked the theming of it, like the alien invasion side of it is very cool. It does that sort of really good Mario RPG thing where it has some really dark stuff in it. It's got like, there's a forest that you go into where like toads have been like planted back into the ground, or like they've been absorbed into trees. And it's like genuinely really quite creepy. It's also got a great version of like Bowser in it again, and they do some cool stuff with the time travel stuff where, you know, Bowser and Baby Bowser teaming up together and both like bickering between themselves despite literally being the same person at different points in their lives.
Yes.
And the fact that like Baby Luigi is braver than regular Luigi is really funny. Like a lot of the time, regular Luigi is trying to run away, and both Baby Luigi and Baby Mario are having to drag him back in, which I think is it's a really interesting game. And I was struggling to work out which Mario and Luigi game I was going to put here, because Superstar Saga does some really cool things as well. Bowser's Inside Story, obviously the switching between Bowser and Mario and Luigi, and the sort of the 2D gameplay is really interesting. But yeah, Partners in Time, it felt more traditional RPG dungeons, which is a thing that I really like. And yeah, just had a really good time with it. Really enjoyed it.
That's very cool to hear. Yeah, this is the one I grew up with, right? It's the only Mario and Luigi game that I had when I was younger, and so I kind of like attached myself to it quite strongly. And then I grew up and I went on the internet and everyone's like, "Oh, that's the bad one," and I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I didn't play the right one." I've tried to start Superstar Saga maybe 7 or 8 times in my life, and for whatever reason, I just can never get past like the 3 or 4 hour mark in it. You know, I tried to let's play it like twice, I think, and like I always come up against something that just kind of stops me. I do want to go back to it one day, but something about Partners in Time really did get me, because I'm a big time travel fan, and so like that hook from a narrative perspective, I was always a big fan of and really enjoyed, as goofy as it is. And yeah, I never really got round to Bowser's Inside Story, but like having looked at some Bowser's Inside Story, there's a lot of it that reminds me of Dream Team as well, which I am not a fan of at all. Dream Team is maybe one of the most bloated, terrible RPGs Nintendo has ever made, and yeah, really kind of turned me off quite a bit. And then the Brothership reviews came out, and I wasn't too sure about getting that either. So I don't know. It feels like maybe Partners in Time was the best all along, Matt. Maybe you have cracked the code here.
Well, I think your sensibilities as well, being a little bit more fast paced, not wanting to get like bogged down and stuff. I think this suits that a lot better than a lot of the other Mario and Luigi games.
Right. Yeah.
From my perspective anyway. So yeah, maybe it is the one for anyone who likes Fist Forging Shadow Torch. This is the one to go
absolutely,
for.
Yes. This is the Venn diagram that exists, that only I exist in. Very good. Okay, we're on number 8, right, Devon? Number 8 for you?
Yes, yeah, 8. It's fascinating that was the one they never remade as well, right? Because they did.
Yeah, they never got around to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've always loved the Mario RPGs, but more so on the Paper Mario side. I'll say all 3 Paper Mario games. I'm a super Paper Mario defender.
Okay.
But
okay.
I never.
All right.
Superstar Saga is one of those games I bounced off. I've also bounced off of several times. I need to go back and
Interesting.
see it through. Anyway, next up on the list for me, number 8. I am going to go with a game I have talked about with you a little bit as well, and that is, I don't know if it's a 2023 game or a little bit before that because it was in early access, but it is Power Wash Simulator. This is...
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
It is, like... it's one of those games where if you have not heard of Power Wash Simulator or you haven't played it and you hear me, placing it on any kind of top 10 list, you probably think I'm a psychopath, which I may be a psychopath, but that's, that's outside of putting Power Wash Simulator on this list.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
It is a phenomenal game. It just unlocks a certain part of your brain, or maybe it numbs a certain part of your brain where it is so satisfying just washing the dirt off of these different things, these different objects. It's one of those things where you have a constant task list as well. There's all these tiny little like surfaces on the different objects, and there's a lovely little ding sound effect that plays every time you do it. It's pure dopamine whenever you hit it. They've done a huge number of like both I think paid and free DLCs. Like I saw they did
all those collaborations with like
they did a SpongeBob, a Shrek DLC.
Yeah, there's Lara Croft, Final Fantasy 7 as well.
Fantasy 7.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a beautiful mess of a game because I think it's Square Enix owned. No, they own like the publishing.
It's published by Square Enix Collective. Yes.
Yes. So they have the license to collaborate with all that IP if that's your sort of thing. But I mean, for me, it's more just the objects. Like there's one I remember doing a giant skate park. That was a huge task. But
I love that one. That one is so satisfying.
I know. It's very, very satisfying. And there is like light progression elements of it where you can unlock like more powerful nozzles and different soaps and things like that to make it go a little bit quicker. But it's one of those games where we're all, no one's getting any younger, right? Like you have a stressful day of work or something like that. You come home like after dinner, you grab a beer or a glass of wine or something like that. Maybe throw on like a podcast or a video essay on in the background and just sort of unwind, power wash some stuff. It's absolutely outstanding.
I think, Devon, we're cut from the same cloth of like H-Bomber Guy video on one monitor, power wash on the other, right? Like, is there a better perfect combination? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, it's truly incredible. Like you talk to a lot of people and they have things like comfort shows, which I'm not discrediting. If you've got a TV show that you love to watch over and over again because it makes you feel good, that's lovely. But Power Wash Simulator, I think, is the closest you can get in a video game form of that, right? Where it's just like you can unwind, you can relax, you can have something that, gets those synapses lighting up in your brains, the neurons firing off because you're completing tasks and feeling like you're productive. It's truly like it's actually a wonderful video game. It sounds silly, but it is one of those things where it's like this could, not storytelling wise, but what you were talking about earlier, NBZ, where like the things that this game does, I think could really only function as well as it does in video game form, right? And it's it's worth checking out. I believe it's on Game Pass, right? I bought it.
It was.
I mean,
I
played
played it through Game Pass, so
check it out. If you're feeling stressed out, which God knows there's a lot of real world things to be stressed out about lately, so give it a look.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the screw attack is great and all as an upgrade, but I don't think you have lived till you've upgraded the strength of your washer and power wash simulator. It might be the best feeling upgrade in the world. Like when you unlock that thing and you're like, oh my god, the dirt goes away so much faster. Holy shit! It's just the dopamine lift on that is pretty fucking massive.
I've seen there's a big community of people online that like they're like power wash purists, where they only it's like only yellow nozzle, which for those of you who haven't played, yellow nozzle is sort of the it's sort of like the average nozzle. It's definitely the one you use the most, but only yellow nozzle, only like base upgraded power wash. It's like I don't know, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's the upgrade aspect is definitely part of the experience.
Yeah, hugely satisfying, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great. It's like it is the ultimate podcast game. I think I played 40 hours of Power Wash Simulator, and that was basically me getting through my podcast backlog. Essentially, it's a great excuse to do that, which is very, very good. So, had a great time with it. Lovely. All right, my number 8. It's a little game. So, as I say, context for this year, I've gone very deep into rhythm games this year, I think. Part of this is driven by the fact that I went to Japan, and there's lots of rhythm games there. The other part of it is part of my job. We signed a game called Unbeatable that got announced over the summer. That is a game that I love deeply, and I really have enjoyed working on it, and I play it quite a lot, and so I have kind of been opening my eyes to more rhythm game stuff, generally speaking, and one of those games is a little game called Rhythm Sprout that came out a few years ago. I believe I watched Patrick Klepek play it as part of they usually go like during Next Fest back at Waypoint, and now at Remap they do a whole stream where they're like, let's check out some Next Fest games and play them, and he is also a big rhythm game person, and so as soon as I saw this I was like, oh, this is definitely up my alley, and it's a different kind of rhythm game because it's basically like a narrative rhythm game where you are this little sprout guy, and you are just walking along a road, and you basically do rhythm stuff as you walk along, and enemies come towards you, and so there's like kind of the main song that you're doing as you're walking, and then you kind of get into enemy encounters and it does like a twist on the song as you're fighting them, and so you have this kind of sequence that comes, and you basically are taking their HP down by doing this little sequence, and then you kind of go back to the main kind of walking along, and it's 3 buttons, so I think it uses the shoulder buttons and then one of the face buttons, so you can basically, the thing that really got me about it is like it starts relatively simple and you're like, okay, getting the hang of this, and at a point in time with it, and this happens with a lot of the rhythm games I find, is you just enter the zone, right? You just become completely zen with it, and you don't even realize you're pressing the buttons. Like, your body takes over. It's a similar thing with like learning an instrument or anything like that, where the muscle memory just kind of kicks in, and you don't even, like, if the problem is if you think about it, you're going to mess up, right? The best thing to do is to just not think and let your body react to it. And there are sequences at the end of Rhythm Sprout where I'm like, I don't know how I did that, like I don't know how I did that and got through this sequence and didn't mess up a single note. It's very satisfying in that way. I think it's very bizarre. It has like kind of goofy writing. There's a whole bit about like a bouncer who loves Lord of the Rings and is like talking about like Ian McKellen, and I'm like, this is very strange. And then there's like a whole sequence where there's an FMV bit that goes on. So there's like a curious, weird humor to it. Very quirky, but extremely short as well. It's like 2-3 hours long. But a very kind of a perfect Steam Deck game again. I feel like you'll see a theme in my list generally is like the Steam Deck has been my buddy this year. Has been very much my kind of go-to of like, I just need something handheld and easy to play, and Rhythm Sprout definitely fit the bill there. And I don't think it's on console. I think it is still just on PC. So that's definitely a good place to check it out. But a quirky, weird little game. It looks very cute. I don't think many people
like the art style and everything. It's cute. Yeah.
Lovely. Next is Matt. Back to you for number 7.
Number 7 on my end is Papers, Please.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
A well-known indie, which I played on the Vita this year. I dug the Vita out for slightly non-Vita-y purposes. After Astrobot came out this year, I got very into playing some of those PS1 games that I've always known about, but Astrobot sort of brought it back into my memory that, Japan Studio was a weird studio, and they did a lot of stuff. So, yeah, dug the Vita out for for that side of things. But while I had it out, I was like, you know what? I've got a ton of Vita games that I just never got around to playing. The Vita was like I think it was a lockdown purchase for me that just ended up not getting a lot of use. So yeah, dug it out this year, and this is Lucas Pope, who went on to do Return of the Obra Dinn, which is obviously another big game in this sort of genre. But Papers, Please, really interesting little game where you play as a border control agent in a sort of what is clearly like a sort of Soviet Eastern European country, and you're letting people in based on sort of like passports and other entry requirements. And it seems like a concept that it's hard to sort of describe, and I've heard a lot about it. I didn't really get it until I played it myself. But it has this narrative running alongside it where there's conflicts between nations, and over time, the longer you play for, the more different things you have to check from people coming in. So while it starts out with just passports and potentially like an entry stamp, you end up getting way more and more documents on your desk. And the genius bit of Papers, Please is that your desk is just this like bottom half of the Vita screen. It's not a big area at all, and the game is not made for you to be able to play it well. And any other game, I feel like this could have been made with a really clean UI that had everything in its place, and it still would have like worked to a certain extent. But the way Papers, Please makes your desk this horrible, cluttered place is genuinely genius. Every time you take like 5 documents off someone, on like if you're late in a run, you've got to take a load of stuff. You end up scattering them on your desk, and you have to check them one at a time, and you have to check them against the handbook that you have on your desk. And when you drop that handbook back down, there's a chance you might put it on one of the things you've been handed over, and then you'll check 4 things they've got, and you hand the stuff back to them, and they don't leave, and you're going, why are they not leaving? Oh, they've got a ticket. Where's the ticket? And you're like scrambling. Like I was using the touchscreen on the Vita a lot, and you're scrambling, like literally moving things out of the way to try and find stuff. And this is all set against a time limit that you've got given. So you've got a limit on how many. You've got a day, basically, a day of work, and you want to try and get through as many people as possible because that's what brings in the income. You're paid per person that you see. And alongside that, you've got a family that you've got to look after. You've got a wife, a child, I think like an uncle and like a grandmother all living with you. And they very, very quickly, you are not being paid enough to keep them all warm and fed and not ill. So you have to pay for medicine and for heat and for food. And because of that conflict that you've got there with, keeping people alive, the game also has people, people will bribe you to come in. And you go, well, I will get a letter from the employer. I'll be docked pay from them, but the bribe is bigger than that, so I'll take that. And it's interspersed with, there's an organisation that's trying to get in contact with you to allow people in, and money goes into your bank account, and sometimes you get upgraded into new accommodation, which is good for your family, but then prices go up. And it's so horrible and stressful to do, and you are working on this time limit in real time, like trying to move things around, and sometimes you're trying to go so quickly that you do it wrong. You will let someone in who maybe you don't do an x-ray on them, so therefore you don't find like a concealed weapon they have, and that can cause like a conflict at the border, which then causes international conflict, which changes your job again. Unbelievable game design. The amount of like things that connect together that you wouldn't expect, and the first run of it is just chaos because you don't know what you're doing, but then you can go back in to try and get different endings, and you'll do longer runs of it, and yeah, it's one of those games that I've been meaning to get to for ages, and it is brilliant, like utterly brilliant, really, really good, but also quite difficult to pick up and play. It's not like the idea of picking it up and playing it is like, oh god, it's like work. You're like,
yeah, you kind of have to like psych yourself up for it, right? Like, and I feel like there's a lot of games like that where they like the experience is so strong, but not necessarily fun, right? Like and I feel like Papers, Please I haven't played it, but I've heard a lot about it over the years, and obviously I've watched a bunch of people play it in the past. I think most notably in the Giant Bomb Game of the Year discussions, Patrick Klepek made a gambit to get Papers, Please on the list by sacrificing Super Mario 3D World. So that's always kind of stuck in my mind. But I think as a experience, it felt like a very directly kind of political game at the time it came out in an era when that just didn't exist, right? Like it is saying a lot very succinctly and very smartly, again through the game design of it and through like the very real stress of this job that people do have, but obviously gamifying it in a way to make it still satisfying and fun to like figure out and kind of keep on top of. That kind of like, yeah, it's a game I really should get to, I think.
I genuinely do recommend it because I thought I understood it until I played it, and it's only when you play it that you really, everything starts to click and you're like, oh, this is so smart. And I've still not got around to Obra Dinn either, so that's next on my Lucas Pope list before he releases whatever his next big game is.
Yeah. I mean, I played Obra Dinn and found it hard to get on with. Like I found it very satisfying to begin with, and then like it got to a point near the end where I was like, this is a bit too overwhelming for me. So I definitely want to go back to Papers, Please, because I think it feels like it doesn't necessarily have that same kind of like I don't know, sense to it. It feels quite different in terms of the game design, but still incredibly smart and interesting. So yeah, sounds great. Devon, how about you for number 7?
Yes, number 7. By the way, this may be the first time in the history of the internet, I would say, that we've had 3 people in a call, 3 people on a podcast that all own PlayStation Vitas. So that's
that's very true. Yes. Wow. Gosh.
That's a pretty incredible moment we've got right there. But let's see. Number 7, I have a game that is technically a 2024 release, but really a 2014 release. That is also really kind of a release way before that. But I'm including it because this is sort of where I got into it, and I've had a lot of fun with this game this year. I finally, so NVZ, that I played Overwatch for quite a while before that.
Team Fortress indeed.
2.
Well, you were like a Team Fortress guy. Yes.
Yeah. TF2 is in the the pantheon of games that I would like consider for my favorite of all time. That game means a great deal to me. So on that, in that same vein, I had never played Counter-Strike before, really. I mean, I remember...
Wow, okay.
Yes, yeah. I remember I bought the Counter-Strike pack back in the day, and I've said this to a few people before. Those of you who know. I bought Counter-Strike Source, and I think I just got the whole collection, because to play Trouble in Terrorist Town, the sort of original Among Us, right? In Gary's mod, you needed the Counter-Strike Source weapon view models. So I got Counter-Strike Source for that. Yeah. But regardless, CS Counter-Strike, what was Global Offensive, had its big sort of update into CS2 this year with the Source 2 engine. I know there's been some, things that I guess haven't crossed over as well as some folks would like. I'm not super aware of that because I didn't really play CSGO. But I've been playing Counter-Strike 2 with a group of friends this year, and it is a lot of fun. I think most people, they know Counter-Strike at this point, but for someone who hadn't really played it before, there's absolutely a learning curve because it's so different from other shooters out there, where a game like TF2 or Overwatch, you're sort of constantly moving around. Even if you're not playing a movement character, you're still... there's no benefit to standing still. You want to keep moving. Whereas in Counter-Strike, it's very much the opposite, where if you're moving even a little bit sometimes, your accuracy goes like completely out the window. So it's about balancing like when you should move, a lot of positioning and pinpoint aiming. It's very team-centric, and it's a lot of fun. It really does feel like a game from 20 years ago, and I mean that in a good way. Like, it doesn't feel like I don't know, your Call of Duty or, like a lot of the Battle Royale games and things like that, it feels like it has a core design ethos of an older shooter. And the fact that it's been able, on top of all the loot boxes and microtransactions and stuff like that do surround that game now, the fact that the core gameplay is able to still keep those same tenets that it had all those years ago and still work to the degree that it does to this day is pretty outstanding to me. I've had a lot of fun with Counter-Strike. It's a good time.
Yeah, it's I think I only ever played Counter-Strike at school when everybody like had it on LAN and like hooked up, and I tried it.
Yes, I've heard so many stories about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wasn't very good. I mean, like I had a shitty laptop that just didn't. Like I didn't even use a mouse. I just used the kind of the touchpad on the laptop, and I was like, I can't play a shooter with this. So it never went particularly well for me when it came to trying that. But I did. So the closest I've got is obviously Valorant is a game that is very Counter-Strike coded and very similar gameplay wise. And basically, I played 2 games of Valorant in which my team quit after the first round, like twice in a row, and so it was like me and this one other guy, and I was like, this is the worst experience ever. Why is people like this? Yeah, I think obviously the community around these games can be a nightmare, but it sounds like the games themselves still hold up very well.
This might sound horrible, but there is a strange certain amount of charm to playing a Counter-Strike game, and I think it is truly the closest thing that you could get to playing like a Call of Duty Xbox 360, Xbox Live lobby from 2008 in 2024. It's
they
wild.
Just never lost those vibes. They just kept them the whole time.
They didn't. You'll hear some words you forgot even existed, but
oh boy, okay.
A ringing endorsement.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, Devon, maybe we should play some Counter-Strike together at some point. Maybe I need somebody to drag me through it,
It's fun. Like I said, there's a huge learning curve. Apparently, I just checked. I'm a little bit. I can't believe I've got this much in. I've got about like 100 hours in the game, and I feel like I'm only scratching the surface because it is so like mechanical. But the fact, if you check the Steam charts at any given point, CS:GO is the #1 game that people are playing, and the fact that it still can maintain that is kind of like outstanding. It's pretty.
Yeah, and usually by like a significant margin as well, right? It's like usually like over 1 million people playing every single day, which is mad.
It's that. I think Dota 2, which is another one that it's like, holy shit, I can't believe people are still playing this game. And and PUBG, which I think is big in it's bigger in Europe, I think, right? And other parts, because
huge
PUBG,
in Korea
it's
as well.
huge.
In Korea,
yeah, China is massive, mainly on mobile now. PUBG Mobile, I think, is massive in China. So
it's not big in the States. I mean, I'm sure there are people who still play PUBG out here, but I don't know anyone that plays PUBG. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Fortnite is definitely the dominant battle royale still in the US, but
Apex is pretty big still. Yeah, but Fortnite's the big one.
Makes you realize though, right? Like, why? Hey, all these video game publishers. Why is Sony chasing all this live service stuff? It's because you look at the Steam charts, and that's all it is, right? The top Twitch streams, it's all online multiplayer games. They are by far the most dominant and popular worldwide, right? So, yeah, it is. It's crazy. But you can see why companies want to chase after them. So. Anyway, great stuff. My number 7, finally a game people will have heard of. Apologies for my niche independent games. My number 7 is Dragon Quest IV, which I have taken a while to finish. So I finished it this year. I did start it, I think, last year. But Dragon Quest IV, I can't remember the subtitle now. They all have subtitles. I can't remember if that happened like during the DS era where they gave them the subtitles or if they originally had the subtitles. I know that 3 was Seeds of Salvation, and now for the remake for 3, they actually haven't put that back on it.
Right, it's just
anyway.
3 remake or HD 2D
remake. HD 2D remake, yes. They just dropped the Seeds of Salvation. Come on, guys. Yeah. a lot of the I feel like a lot of the Dragon Quest subtitles are forgettable. A lot of people don't remember what any of them are. But in any case, Dragon Quest 4. The interesting thing, so Dragon Quest 4 wasn't. It was a Famicom/NES game. So like 5 is the first time the Super Nintendo was Dragon Quest. So they actually had 4 entries on one console before moving on to the next. So and you can definitely tell. Like I think Dragon Quest 4. So I played the DS version, the remake of it.
Nice.
Which is a great way to play these games. I think the DS versions of all the Dragon Quest games are very good, made by Art Piazza, who did the Mario and Mario RPG remake. Is that right? I think it was them, or was it? There was a remake that happened recently that was them. Anyway, so yeah, really, really good. I think the coolest thing about Dragon Quest 4 is Dragon Quest 4 feels like when they figured out story in Dragon Quest. Been playing a lot of 3 recently, as I know you have, Devon, and it's definitely a game that is mechanically driven more so than anything. And like, there's nice story stuff around there. Honestly, I really have enjoyed the little bits, but it's very kind of like light flavoring and more stereotypical fantasy stuff, and not going too crazy with it. But Dragon Quest 4 is quite bold, and its structure is quite bold. And I think for me, the first half of Dragon Quest 4 is infinitely more interesting than the second half of Dragon Quest 4. And the reason for that is that essentially what you do is you play through 4 different introductions to characters. So you start the game and you're playing as this character called Ragnar McRyan, who is basically like a Scottish soldier. And he is, defending this castle, going around, and you play as just him, and he's the only character you're playing as. And so it teaches you the systems of Dragon Quest and learning how to fight and all that sort of stuff, going through dungeons. And you play his section, and it stops. And they throw you to a different character. They throw you to this other character whose name I can't remember now, but she's like a Russian princess essentially, and she has her retinue of kind of like people who are helping her. So she's got the priest, and she's got like a magician kind of helping her along. And so you have the party of 3 characters. So like healer, warrior, and mage essentially. And so you do that, and then you go to the next one, and the next town you're playing as this merchant, and he's like running a shop every day, and his story is totally different, and his mechanics are very interesting and weird, and his journey is about like going off and like finding things to sell, and basically it goes on for 4 different vignettes, the last one of these 2 dancer girls, and so you basically get the beginning of all these stories, and then you go for the second half of the game and you pick up as your kind of main character, the hero, and the rest of the game is the hero going and collecting these characters, and basically you have met your entire party before you actually have them as the main party, which I think is just very, I mean, the fact they were doing that back on the NES is remarkable to me. Like, I think it's such a cool structural thing to do. I can't remember who pointed it out, but basically the way that it functions is that the first character, you're just playing as one guy, which is basically Dragon Quest 1, where you have one character. And the second party are 3 characters, which is Dragon Quest 2, which is warrior, mage, and priest. And I was like, wow, that is so cool that they basically structured it in the way of the previous games. And obviously the merchant was a class that got introduced in Dragon Quest 3, and you play as a merchant as the third. So it was just a very, very cool kind of like meta thing as part of Dragon Quest 4. And I just really enjoy, and I think it's very much kind of the character stories are interesting in the beginning. And then I think it falls into a trap I think a lot of Dragon Quest games do. I think 8 falls into this as well, where like the first half is very, narrative driven, you're very character focused, and then the second half just kind of becomes a save the world plot, and it's very inevitable that you're going to land into that eventually.
11
but I think that
as well, a little bit, yeah.
Certainly does, yeah. I think it's a Dragon Quest trope really at the end of the day, which is a bit of a shame, because I think like they set up such great story stuff, and then they're just like, okay, the characters are going to kind of take a back seat here, and we're just going to kind of go and save the world, which is totally cool. But I think it says a lot that I played that first half of the game quite quickly when I first started, and then I didn't get back to it for a very long time, and almost had to like push myself through the end of it, which is not a ringing endorsement, I would say, and it's probably why it's like ended up a little bit lower, and hasn't made it into my top 10 Goatee to Coatee list. And I think it's just because it took me a long time to get back to, but I did enjoy finishing it off. I think there's always a thing with Dragon Quest games at the end where it's like, well, I'm gonna have to grind metal slimes for a few hours here just so I can be the right level for the final boss, and thankfully they give you a tower right at the end where it's like, just go here and like run around for a bit and you'll get the metal slimes. I think the other weird thing about this game for me is it basically went on an entire journey through hardware where I started it on my Ace card on my DS, and then I moved it to my PC, and then I moved it to my Steam Deck, and then I moved it to my Steam Deck OLED. So it went through 4 different devices. So I started it on a DS and finished it on a Steam Deck OLED. So that was a bit of a journey. So, but yeah, very much enjoyed Dragon Quest 4. And now that I'm playing 3, when I finish 3, I will only have 2 more Dragon Quests to play, and then I'll finish all of them.
Wow.
5 and 6, yeah. So I've played every single. Obviously 10 I can't because it's an MMO, and hopefully one day they'll localize that. But discounting 10, I will have played through every single Dragon Quest game. So yeah, 5 and 6, the DS ones, are the last 2 to go.
What's your favorite?
It's a hot take. 7 is my favorite Dragon Quest.
7's good.
I played the 3DS version of 7, and I just love the class system in that game.
It's fantastic.
I love how it is the epitome of Dragon Quest, which is Dragon Quest stories are basically like a series of TV, right? And it's like classic TV. It's like 24 episode, like Monster of the Week TV, where you go to an island. It's like perfectly built for it. Each island is its own like individual story, and like it feels bite-sized and perfect in a way. Despite being the longest Dragon Quest by quite a margin, it still felt very digestible and like snackable, which I really enjoyed. And I think the 3D effect in that game is also excellent. They took it out for 8, and I was very annoyed about that. And I think 8 went down in my estimation partially because of that, weirdly. But I also think that 8 is not as well. I think 8 is like a little bit harsher in its difficulty and a little more frustrating towards the end. So my hot take is 7 is great and 8 is not that great, which I know is the opposite to most Dragon Quest fans.
That's fascinating.
But yeah,
I've been meaning to get to 4 because I'm similar to you. 4, 5, 6 are the only ones that I've not played yet.
Okay, cool.
I've tackled every other one, but yeah, I've been putting off 4. I've been really hoping they bring 4, 5, and 6 to Switch the way that they did with 1, 2, and 3, because this has blocked me from starting 4 for ages. Apparently, there's a ton of party chat for 4, which did not get localized in time for the DS one, but is now in the mobile version.
Yeah.
That is correct. Yes.
I've been holding out for a Switch version, ideally, of 4 with all that party chat back in.
Yeah, and you know what? That party chat stuff could have helped the back half of Dragon Quest 4, I think, to kind of like make it feel a bit more cohesive, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's kind of what I was lacking, is like that lack of party interaction. Without that stuff, you just kind of don't get any, which is a shame.
Yeah, you're only talking to the NPCs, and then you're just on the Save the World story, and you don't know what anyone thinks about it.
Exactly.
But I do want to get on those 3, especially because I've heard 5 is everyone's favorite from the sounds of things. Like,
correct.
Even the series creator, I believe. No, it's.
Yeah, I think so. 3, 5, and 8 are generally thought as like people's favorites, although I think 11 is probably eclipsing some of those now at this point as well. I
wouldn't be surprised. 11's so good. One of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, 11's probably my second favorite after 7. So that game's tremendous. Very, very good game. Anyway, yeah, very close to ending my Dragon Quest journey. I might play Dragon Quest 6 first and save 5 for last, just because of that reason. Just slightly go out of order, but we shall see.
You may, there's a chance there's some more Dragon Quest on this list later. That's all I'll say.
Okay, well, interesting. Good primer then.
Yes.
Matt, to you for number 6.
My number 6 is SteamWorld Build. The SteamWorld game that no one else has played.
It was very close to making it, but it got cut, unfortunately. But I almost put SteamWorld Dig 2 on this list because I played that this year and I hadn't played it before.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a similar boat to Bally and MZ. I've always loved the SteamWorld games. Dig has a special place in my heart. Was it the 3DS? Dig?
It was 3DS, the original 3DS.
Yes, yeah. I remember, I don't know if you guys are the same, I remember back in the day they did those, I think there were 2 sets of them, Wii U and 3DS Humble Bundles, and the original SteamWorld Dig was a part of that, and that's how I played it on, I think it was Wii U initially.
Yeah.
That is correct, yes. I think the first one was in America only, so you could only get US code, so that's why I don't think I had that.
Oh, really?
But the second bundle they did, yes, I believe that was the case. So the second one they did have European code, so we could get those. But yeah, I think the initial one was like, why are these fucking region locked? And it was very silly. But anyway.
Big fan of the SteamWorld games. And then Build, I like city builders, but I never stick with them, is my issue. But Build was on Game Pass, and I was a little bit fascinated by it, just because when SteamWorld tackles a genre, it tends to do something different with it. And so I wanted to see what they did with the city building thing, and it's a really... the way they've done it is they've made it a story campaign that you complete by building, which I think is interesting. And it also separates from other things by having this separate underground section, which, rather than being a city builder, is more of a tower defense game / like employee management game almost. You have to recruit miners to find you stuff, and you sort of directly control them in the underground area to find resources. And the campaign, the goals that you have in the campaign will switch you between the overground and the underground, depending on what is required to do next. And it's very good. It's extremely well made for console. So I played it on Xbox through Xbox Game Pass, and it has a great console control scheme, which a lot of like city builders don't do. And because of that, it makes it feel very approachable. It is not a game where you are going to really fail, if that makes sense. It's not going to really punish you for making mistakes. It allows you to fix them. And for all these reasons, I really enjoyed it. And it fits into the SteamWorld narrative. It's set it's the one that is set at the same time as SteamWorld Dig 2 and before Heist, so it's still on Earth, and it has that sort of like cowboy, deserty feeling that Dig 1 and 2 have. But the reason it's on this list is because it taught me about gentrification in a way that I've never understood before. And I found this absolutely fascinating. The game starts with workers. They are the first people that you get, and you get them by creating housing. You just create bog standard housing, and you get workers, and those workers need certain things. And they only need two things. They need a shop to buy things from, and they need a place where they can get retuned up. So basically a shop and a little medic centre. And as long as you have those, your workers will be doing their thing. And if you build more housing for more workers, you might need to build more shops within travel distance to them. So if you start building the city out, you'll need to build a shop further out. And it means that the cities that you create are really natural, and like they follow the rules that like real life cities do, where housing is built around things that already exist, and then as housing expands, things that you have to build things around that to supply the people that are there. But then, as time goes on, you need people who are above worker levels. You need engineers who are, I guess, more skilled workers. And they require different things, but they still require the general store. They still require the tune-up places. And then you build Aristobots, who are the aristocrats, and they require like fancy restaurants and stuff like this. They no longer require the original general stores. And because of where you end up building up, from the there's a train station right in the middle of town. That's where you build up from originally. Everything has to connect to the train station through roads. And because that's where you start, that's where you'll first get your engineers in place. Because you're like, okay, they've got all the connections they need for everything. And that's also where... So the centre of the city is then where you end up getting these Aristobots, the aristocrats. And then suddenly you're like, okay, they need all these things and I can't connect them up to them, and I need to build them better roads because I need them to be able to travel further. And then you look at your general store and you go, this general store now isn't supplying anyone anymore. All of the people that this was supplied have been moved out to the suburbs. So this general store is getting knocked down and I'm building a fancy restaurant here. And it clicked for me and I went, oh, this is just a massive gentrification simulator. And it is purposefully designed that way, and I thought it was brilliant. Like, genuinely, like, it was just one of those things where, like, damn, I've not thought about it this deeply before, and it just, I did it by accident. I gentrified by accident, and I made the centre of the city the most expensive place to live by accident, and had workers and, like, the lowest sort of, like, people in society pushed to the edges by accident. And like the fact that the game was designed in such a way to encourage that felt like it was we were talking about like Papers, Please being like fairly political. Like this felt political, and that felt intentional. Which I've not played. I've played city builders before, and normally it's just a case of, I don't know, you build what you want, you try and get the transport links to do, and eventually you put in a cheat that gives you unlimited money because you get bored of it.
Oh, of course,
Whereas this was much more of a system of like, it really frequently gives you upgrades and really frequently like pushes you through the story. And I think I probably finished it in about maybe like 8 hours of a campaign.
Okay,
and
that's very reasonable for a city builder, you know.
Exactly. I think they genuinely have done something different with a city builder with SteamWorld Build, and they've created something that feels more like a game than a lot of like ones I played before. Like, it's not meant to be played. There is an unlimited mode, but that's not what it's meant to do. You're meant to hit this end point, and basically the end point is you build a rocket and you leave Earth. So, you know, leading into like SteamWorld Heist and the outer space stuff. And
interesting.
And yeah, I'd really recommend this, even if you're not into city builders, because it's not my genre either. But it's a good SteamWorld game. Like, it's a really good SteamWorld game.
Yeah. That sounds really interesting. And honestly, I think the SteamWorld series generally has done a great job of getting people into genres they wouldn't be into otherwise, right? Like, my first deck builder was SteamWorld Quest, and then after that, I played Slay the Spire, and my life ended. So, you know, like, it was, I think it's a good kind of like onboarding into potential, like, much more complicated, much more systems-y games. But they do a good job of like getting people into it.
I'll say Heist is a very approachable XCOM like. Like, you're right. They're really good at doing that.
Did you guys play Heist 2? I heard good things about it, but I haven't checked it out yet.
Not yet. Yeah, it's definitely on my list. I know Bally has played it and he's talked about it a little bit on the show, but yeah, he recommends it quite highly. He really enjoyed it, so I think I definitely do want to get to that at some point.
Me too.
Because the original Heist is very good. Yeah. Excellent. Great. Devon, to you for number 6.
Okay. I'll have to check out Build. That you sort of sold me on it. I think as well with city builders having, I don't know, I just remember what was it? City Skyline 2 had a bit of a disastrous launch this year. So,
yes. Yeah, it was not great.
Yeah, hearing one that turned out a little better. So next up for me, this is number, are we on 6 now? Or on 6?
6, yes. Yeah, correct.
Yes, okay. So I am gonna go with number 6, Monster Hunter Rise, a game we need to play together at some point. We keep talking about it.
Yeah.
So I have not put in a huge amount of hours into this game like a lot of people have with Monster Hunter. I think I've only got about 25 hours in it right now. I'd like to go back and play because I've had a great time. But how do I talk about Monster Hunter Rise? So I have technically played every entry in the Monster Hunter series since 4 Ultimate on 3DS. I picked that up. Yes, I picked that up, bounced off a little bit. I picked up Generations on 3DS, bounced off. I didn't pick up, Generations X or Cross on Switch. But I played World for a bit, also sort of bounced off that. And now finally in Monster Hunter Rise, I feel like, and it's not like I was not enjoying my time in those games before. It never quite like sunk its teeth into me in the way that Monster Hunter has with so many, especially after World. But for whatever reason in Monster Hunter Rise, it really, I don't know, I felt the itch to just keep playing and playing and playing that game. And as I think, with all of us, something that's been very valuable this year, it is a perfect Steam Deck game, being that it's, essentially a Switch game scaled up. It runs at like a flawless 60. So being able to play that on Steam Deck is lovely. I think the thing that really did it for me was I found a weapon that I was like, oh, this is for me. This is perfect.
Right.
I have always had a thing, and honestly, in games in general, whether it's an RPG, like figuring out different character builds and things like that, or picking a weapon in Monster Hunter where it's like the, overwhelming choice and feeling like you're going to make the wrong decision and waste time. But I picked the Switch Axe, which is sort of a hybrid weapon. It goes from a big axe to like a slightly more nimble sword that you charge up. It has this big elemental blast. And it really clicked with me, sort of being able to switch between those two modes of the weapon. It actually feels a lot like Bloodborne weapons, the switch weapons, where you can hit a button to switch between the two different modes. Which Bloodborne is another one of those games that's in the short list for potential all-time favorites for me. So anything that reminds me of Bloodborne is probably pretty good. And as well in Rise, I know actually some players were not a huge fan of this because it's not quite as, it doesn't have as many of the sim aspects as a game like Monster Hunter World does, but all of the different movement abilities you get, you get a, sorry, my cat just hit my mic, but he knows I'm talking about Monster Hunter. Any game that has a grappling hook, it goes up. I think similar to what you said, where if a game is a Metroidvania, it goes up 1 to 2 points. If you've got a grappling hook, it goes up at least 1 point for me. And the grappling hook in this game is pretty good, along with a dog mount that you can quite literally do like Mario Kart style drifting on.
That's wicked.
Oh my god.
It's so good.
The movement in Rise is so good compared to previous Monster Hunter games.
Yes, it's outstanding. Like the different options it gives you is amazing. But what's so good about it to me as well is it still has that sort of classic Monster Hunter clunkiness, right? Where a big thing in Monster Hunter is like the combos you may be doing with your weapons in terms of like inputs are relatively simple, but it's more positioning your character in both distance from the monster but also direction to getting it to actually go off where while simultaneously avoiding attacks. That is the true difficulty and gameplay loop in Monster Hunter. So adding those different options you have as a player with the grappling hook and with the dog, you'd think may trivialize the game. But I've seen a lot of people say, in particular the DLC, which I'm excited to play at some point, Sunbreak, is like the hardest Monster Hunter has ever been. They found a really nice balance at making it so you have more options at a player, but not trivializing the difficulty with the game. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm really excited for Wilds now. And at the time of recording, they had that, a few weeks ago, they had that Steam player test.
The beta, yeah.
And it, like, broke records. I mean, it was...
Yeah, it was crazy.
It's going to be a huge game. I think Monster Hunter Wilds is going to be
pretty
massive.
Enormous.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people who are into Monster Hunter. A bunch of people at work are into it as well. And I'm like, I got to do this. So there was a Fanatical bundle recently, like a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, where you could get Rise and World and DLCs for both of them for £5 each if you bought them all together.
Oh, wow.
So basically spent 20 quid and got all of that.
That's a good deal.
I have a lot of Monster Hunter to play, but it's that weird thing where like Wilds is coming out and I'm like, oh, it's probably good to play it when the new thing is happening and everyone's playing it, so I don't know. Maybe that is a better decision, is to actually just play that when it comes out. But I do want to check these other ones out, and Rise does seem like, so it's definitely refined things to this point where it's a much easier jumping in point.
No, absolutely. And it seems like, from what I can tell of Wilds, that it really is taking the best of, both worlds from Monster Hunter World and from Rise, because just from what I've seen doing a YouTube rabbit hole, in the Monster Hunter community, there is a pretty large divide between the people who, prefer those more realistic simulation aspects of Monster Hunter World and the people who are, a little bit more like movement and gameplay focused, such as myself, I would say, who prefer Rise. And it seems like they're taking some of those aspects. Like, I may be wrong, but I think the dog mount is back in Wilds, right? And some of those other movement options.
I've seen some of that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but it is, like, graphically, it's, it's for next-gen systems. It's not for the Switch, so you've got more power there. Mm-hmm. There's some more simulation stuff. We'll have to see when the game comes out, but it seems like Wilds will be as good of a place, as ever to jump into the series.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll get there. We'll hop on. We'll play. But
for sure.
In the meantime, I've got to tell you about a game that everybody should play. My number 6, Donkey Kong King of Swing for the Game Boy Advance.
Oh man,
yes.
Yes. So I don't know how this started. I think I had it on my Steam Deck one night, and I decided, sure, I've been meaning to play that for some time, so I just booted up Donkey Kong King of Swing. I started playing it. I was like, yeah, it's my kind of video game. This monkey swinging around, he's grabbing pegs. Yeah, I was always fascinated by this game. I read a lot about it in magazines back in the day, and I remember like seeing early video of it and being like, oh, that seems like a cool, weird concept. And like it feels like very much a game made for the GBA in the sense that, you know, the original Game Boy just had the 2 buttons and a D-pad, right? And the GBA comes out and they're like, hey, we got these shoulder buttons, you know? How about them shoulder buttons? They're like, hey, what can we do with those? Let's make a video game based around that concept. And so enter Donkey Kong King of Swing. It's actually called DK King of Swing, right? I don't think Donkey Kong is actually officially in the name. And it is essentially a kind of like platforming climbing game where you go through these levels and you have to get to the top by basically holding onto these circular pegs in the environment. And some pegs are like they spin a certain way. Some pegs like only last for a certain amount of time and then they disappear. And then there's lots of enemies in the space as well. And so you can basically, if you hold both of your shoulder buttons down, then you'll kind of grab onto 2 pegs at the same time, just kind of stay there. And if you hold them down for long enough, you basically charge up this move, and then Donkey Kong can like spring himself forward and kind of like bounce like a ball at enemies. And they get a lot of mileage, I would say, out of this very simple concept, this very kind of limited mechanical moveset. I think if I had played this without emulation and without the ability to save state, I might not like this game very much. It was very similar with Mario Pinball Land, which I played in a similar way, where I would save state because if I fucking fell down the hole, I'd have to go back and get all the way back again. It's the same thing here. Like, it has a live system, and you can spend bananas. So you collect bananas, obviously, it's a Donkey Kong game, but within the level, you can spend those bananas to heal yourself or give yourself life back, or spend them to like make yourself invincible as well. And so there are ways around it, but there's definitely situations and levels where I got to and I was like, if I didn't have a save state, I would be like throwing my fucking Steam Deck at the wall, because there's some infuriating situations where you're like, this level feels like it's this entire like near the end sequence of like this gauntlet of doing stuff, and you're like, you mess up once and you're like, well, I'm back to the beginning of that whole thing. So yeah, I could see like back in the day it causing a lot of frustration, but obviously I think part of the reason for that is it's a very short game. You can beat it in like 4 or 5 hours, and so, you know, kids playing these games, you've got to kill them a bunch of times so that they get a lot of hours out of it and don't feel like, you know, they're complaining to their parents that they finished it or whatever. I think generally it's pretty cool, and it has like variety in its level design and themes. There's definitely boss fights definitely feel a little bit strange because you're like on a kind of static screen and they are kind of moving around a lot of the time, and it's about positioning yourself to like wait for them to open up and then charge yourself up and kind of fling yourself at them. I found some boss fights ridiculously easy, and then some that were insanely difficult. The last one in particular, part of the boss fight is a race to get to the top, and I swear to God I spent 20 minutes trying to beat this fucking crocodile up this wall. It was insane. Like, there's like a momentum to it that you need to get perfectly right, and it felt like I won by a millisecond on the one that I did, and that's after trying and trying and trying again and again. So yeah, there's definitely like nuance to it, and it can be quite challenging at times, but it's just a weird fucking video game, and I'm glad it exists. And then, Matt, you told me, you're like, oh, there's a DS game, and I was like, wait, really? I didn't even know that they made a follow-up to this. So
I was just gonna say, I just pulled up the Wikipedia page while you were talking about it. I was like, what the fuck? There's a DS game? Like, I've heard of the GBA one. The DS game I've never heard of. Ever.
Neither had I.
The DS one is, I think, it's considered to be the better of the two as well. Like, it expands upon King of Swing stuff. There's more like, there's bigger levels. It sort of leans a little bit more into that like Donkey Kong Country style, despite having the King of Swing gameplay. Yeah. Definitely worth playing if you liked King of Swing at all. I think the Jungle Climber on the DS, worth giving a go.
I never thought about this until this discussion, but it is interesting how that sort of style of gameplay lives on a little bit in Astro's Playroom and Astro Bot. Because you're also a monkey climbing up those pegs. It's the same sort of thing.
Very true.
Yeah.
Gosh, that is... I didn't make that connection, but they used a monkey there as well, so I guess that says everything we need to know about Japanese game design. So, that's...
What a weird console the GBA was. Like, it's filled with all these weird-ass games that I think most people have forgotten about, but yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. I'll play Jungle Climber, I think, at some point next year. My only worry about that is, like, as a DS games, I find DS games, they either are great on Steam Deck because they don't require the second screen as much, or they're, like, fully built for two screens, in which case you kind of have to play them on DS itself. That's true. I would like to get around to that one for sure. All right, let's get into these top fives. Matt, what is number 5 for you?
Number 5 is Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, or just...
Oh, nice.
Is that 1 or 4?
That's 1.
That's
1.
Okay.
Sly Raccoon in the UK, because we were far less imaginative with our naming.
Wait,
apparently.
is it really? It's Sly Raccoon in the UK?
Yeah, just Sly Raccoon. Yeah.
Wow.
So this has been one that I've always wanted to get around to. I'm a big Ratchet and Clank guy. That was the PS2 platformer that I really grew up with. I got a PS2 rather than a GameCube, despite having been a Nintendo kid before that.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay.
Ratchet and Clank was like the Mario for me at that point, because I didn't have Sunshine, and I absolutely fell in love with Ratchet and Clank. And it was funny doing that because you always saw Jak and Daxter and Sly. Those were like the 3 sort of PS2 platformers from that era.
Yeah.
And always sort of admired it from afar, but never got around to playing it. And I've been eyeing it up for ages, and then Sony they created a new PS2 emulator on PS5 recently, and they just started putting games onto it through PlayStation Plus. And Sly Cooper was added, and thought it would be a good time to jump in. And nice. It's a really fun little platformer. It's really interesting. It's almost occasionally a bit Crash Bandicoot like, in terms of levels are quite thin and one direction. You sort of go from back to forth, but there's more exploration involved. There's clues in bottles that you find throughout the level. I need to find 20 out of 20 of these, and if you do so, there's a safe at the end that you can unlock. And it, as a platformer, it's good. Like, it's not the most amazing thing in the world. What really makes it a fun thing to play is the theming of it. That really, like, genuinely beautiful cel-shaded art style that leans into, like, comic books of the era. There's a French artist who does all, like, the cutscenes behind it, and they look fantastic. And just sort of the stealth theming behind the Sly games is really, really cool. There's like an ability at one point you can jump into like a barrel, and for like motion detected areas there'll be like like lasers going back and forward, or enemies walking past, and you sort of like, if you stop moving, you hide in the barrel. Very Solid Snake in the cardboard box. But it's all put in a sort of A to B 3D platforming. What am I trying to say? It's all done like a 3D platformer. But all the levels are there's really cool theming into all the levels as well. Each world is basically a heist that you're trying to pull off, with a hub world and a big enemy at the end. There's a criminal gang that you're trying to fight against. Sly is he's a bit of a Robin Hood. He steals from thieves and sort of gives to the poor, that type of thing. And there's this criminal gang full of like awful people who killed Sly's family. That's like a weird sort of dark thing behind this.
Oh god, okay. Jeez.
Yeah, and each world is themed around the final boss. They're all sort of like different areas of the world. The first one is like Wales, which I think is really funny. It's like a stormy island off the Welsh coast, which I think is really, really cool. Each hub world has its own theming, and then each level is basically, the idea being is that you're going to this level for some reason in the heist. There's a reason behind it, and And yeah, really, like, I flew through it. I had a really good time playing it. It's a real sort of like time capsule of what like PS2 platforming was like more refined than a lot of the stuff on the PS1, but still finding its feet in a certain way. And similar to my Partners in Time opinion, I go against the consensus here because I've also been playing Sly 2 recently, and I don't like Sly 2 nearly as much. It's considered to be the better game, but they do they go for like an open world design with Sly 2.
Oh, okay.
Where there's very few actual like levels, like well like curated levels. You just have different platforming challenges within this open world. And I can see why that would hit in an era of GTA 3 and San Andreas. Like if I was a kid back then,
Jack and Daxter games got kind of like affected by that as well, right?
Yeah, Jack 2 had a very similar thing, and I can imagine that if I was a kid, I probably would have liked Sly 2 more. But playing it now, Sly 1 feels really well designed and curated in a way that Sly 2 doesn't. And yeah, it's on PS5 now, quite easily accessible. I recommend anyone jump into it. Really, really good time.
Oh yeah, I'd really want to get to this. I mean, I've had it lit up on my on my Steam Deck, I should say, for a long time. The thing with that is because of the era. The camera control you can't change, and it's like inverted by default, and so I had to set a custom control thing. Yes, it's very annoying. I basically had to set custom control for the camera on Steam Deck to do it, to play the original. But the only Sly game I've played is the Vita one made by Sanzaru. That I was interested how much of the kind of variety of gameplay was in the original, because that Sanzaru one, like, you do these like weird hacking things with one of the other characters, like 3 different characters, and you play like 3 different gameplay styles, and I was like, is this what all the Sly games are, or is maybe like this one on Vita, they're just trying some new stuff? But yeah, sounds like from what you're saying, it's relatively more kind of like straightforward 3D platforming stuff with linear levels, with that kind of that sneaking stealth theming to it more so than anything else.
But it does. I will say Sly 1 has a lot of mini games involved as well, which is one of those things, probably not one of the strongest parts of it, but it feels very of the era of the PS2. The Ratchet & Clank games are very similar, with like hacking mini games and stuff added in, but it's not until Sly 2 where you do start playing as all 3 of the main characters. Which is why I think Sly 1 is stronger, because every level is built around his particular abilities, and Sly 2 has to sort of build every level so you can play it as all 3 characters.
Yeah.
There's things to be gained and lost there. It depends on your preference, but definitely worth trying out. Yeah, really interesting.
Very cool. Devon, over to you for number 5.
Yes. You know, it's interesting how, of that kind of like pantheon of PS2 era platformers, and Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, and Ratchet & Clank. Ratchet & Clank is really the only one that's survived. It's sad. It'd be cool to see them revisit those 2 series. I've always wanted to play the Sly Cooper series, but never gotten around to it. That'll be something to look out for in the future. But to sort of continue on with that PlayStation Sony love, I'm going to go with, for my next entry, Astrobot. I know you played Astrobot, NBZ. Did you play Astrobot, Matt? Or...
Mate, I flew through that in a weekend.
Yes.
What a game. Platinum. I've been doing the speedrun levels recently. Cannot beat Bally's scores. Don't know what he's doing.
Bally's, if you want to fucking like die trying, then yeah, you can. But Bally is going insane with those scores at the moment. So
I did one level where I was like, I've absolutely nailed that. I found like a little shortcut, 6 seconds away from Bally's time. I don't know where the times come from. Anyway, what a game! Like, what a game!
It's outstanding. I actually, right before, I think several days before Astrobot came out, I re-downloaded Astro's Playroom and went through that, and also, it's not a particularly old game, but holds up very well. Lots of really, really cool stuff in that game, that it feels like they just went back and Astrobot and sort of perfected. Astrobot's another one of those games that it's like I really don't know how to talk about it a ton in ways that other people haven't, because it's just I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't even think you necessarily need nostalgia for a lot of these PlayStation characters. Like if you can play through the tree level, for example, in Astrobot and not have like a huge smile on your face the entire time, I don't know who you are. I don't think video games are for you because that entire experience is just it's lovely. It is alongside I think another game in a completely different way, but alongside another game we'll talk about later. It is just the purest like joyful experience you can have in a video game all year, and you will have a smile on your face the entire time. It is alongside the Astro's Playroom, one of the two PlayStation 5 games that really sort of, I think, explores all the different avenues and different things that you can do with the DualSense controller. Not really any other game did it. The only other one I can think of that sort of did it in an interesting way was Returnal. Like you had
Returnal. That's exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
Which I really do think it's one of those games where, you know, it's a third-person shooter. You'd think it would play better on mouse and keyboard just with the mouse input, and it probably does, but I think you're kind of losing something in that game if you're not playing it on the DualSense, because it does really do cool stuff. But that's besides the point. You know, everyone has talked about it, but it's just I've never had so much fun punching like sprinkles, things like that.
Oh my god! Honestly, the best part of that entire video game is just running around with the physics and just hitting apples or whatever the fuck, like the hundreds of thousands of like things that fall from the sky.
No, I know, and that
is unreal. That stuff.
That is the true power of the PlayStation 5, right? Because I can't.
Gen.
It is next gen. I can't imagine you could have anything like that on even, you know, a PS4 or PS4 Pro. The amount of just different objects that all have their own physics tied to them, and alongside like the very Wii remote style sounds that come out of the controller and HD. Well, I guess it's not HD Rumble on PlayStation, but the haptics that you get, it is an outstanding video game, and the fact that they were able to get so many third-party characters as little costumes, like, you know, one of the very early ones is you get Snake and Raiden, I think, which it was cool to see. There's some Castlevania stuff later on. It's one of those things where if Astrobot did not have any of that PlayStation stuff, I think it would be like 90 to 95% as good as it is. It really is, you know. It's not like Smash, for example. Smash is a great video game, but like you're there in Smash because you can have Mario fight, Kazuya from Tekken and fight Banjo, right? Where there is that crossover element in this game, but it's sort of just the cherry on top. The only thing,
totally.
And we have talked about this, NBZ, and I felt validated because I think you said you agreed with me. My only complaint in this game is the fact that the base movement of Astro feels there's a little bit to be desired. There's no Mario 64 style long jump or you know, sort of movement / speed ability that you can do. There's not quite as much player expression as I look for in my 3D platformers, but that being said, it's an outstanding game. It is basically Mario Galaxy 3, and I think it is, you know, if you don't have a PS5, it is a reason to pick one up. Probably not PlayStation 5 Pro, but, you know, it's still...
Yeah, exactly.
It was the worst advert for the PS5 Pro ever. They announced PS5 Pro so shortly after I played Astrobot, and I was like, nothing's going to look better than this.
No, yeah.
I clearly don't need this. Astrobot looks amazing.
No, it probably is the best looking game I played this year. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, I think like the PlayStation stuff for me it's just very fun as someone who like knows a lot about video games, of like you go there and you're like, you hit the Raiden bot and he does the watermelon thing, and you're like, oh, the fucking watermelon, you know, like stuff like that is just so fun. I just loved running around that area and just seeing like what choice did they make here. And you like, you go up to Alucard and he just like, you know, jumps out of his throne and destroys skeletons in front of him, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's just, there's so many like little things, touches that are just PlayStation history, and just like the way they represent that stuff is so thorough and clearly with so much love put into it. It's tremendous.
No, and not to mention all the the handful of special levels you get at the end of each world, where you basically play as an Astrobot version of different Sony characters. In particular, I guess I'll spoil this one because it's the first world. The first one is Ape Escape, and I've never played any Ape Escape game, but I kind of want to check one out. It seems like fun. It seems like a good time.
Yeah. I downloaded it onto Steam Deck after I'd played that.
Did you really?
I do want to get to that as well. Yes.
I will say nothing. There are spoilers for later.
Yes. We'll get there. Awesome. Okay, great. My number 5 is a game that Nintendo decided to release in the West finally.
Mother 3.
Densetsu no Starfy. The Starfy games, which are Japanese-only platformers that came out on the GBA, 3 of them, in fact, and they decided, hey, let's just put these out in Japanese onto Nintendo Switch Online. Yeah. And I was like, that's fine, like they're platformers, right? That won't be an issue.
There won't be a lot of text.
Turns out
there
no, it won't be a lot of text. Turns out it's a big issue, in fact, actually, and I feel sorry for people who just played them through the Switch. I had decided to download the fan translation of it and play on Steam Deck instead, because I'm like, well, if I can do it in English, I might as well. And there was a fan translation available, and so I started playing this Starfy game, and I'm like, wait, what? How is anyone going to play this not in English? Because it's so interesting as it's not. I don't know if I would call it a platformer necessarily. It's like it's an exploration 2D game that has platforming elements, but because you are a starfish, right? The entire thing takes place underwater, and so your movement is like completely free. Like, you just basically move around the screen like Superman, essentially. And so, like, there's not really jumping. There's moving through spaces. There's using your star spin attack to hit things. And you do go out on land at points, and so you do jump and run and stuff on that. But so much of this game is underwater that it doesn't work in that way. And a lot of the levels are like, you talk to your little fucking underwater friends, and they're like, oh, go talk to these 3 other guys, then come back to me and I'll open this door for you. And I can imagine if you're playing this in Japanese and you're like, I actually don't know what I'm supposed to do, or like after talking to those characters, knowing that you have to go back to somebody. So it was a curious choice. And it turns me off a little bit from playing 2 and 3 on there. And unfortunately, 2 and 3 don't have fan translations at the moment. But it's extremely breezy. Like, it's a very easy game, extremely simple. And, you know, the boss fights are like, man, they move so slowly, and I'm just like, I'm just going to hit you 3 times and then they're dead, and it very much follows that kind of like traditional setup, but it has a lot of charm to it, and it looks really nice. It's just a very, very pretty GBA game. Like, Starfy as a character is a fun design, and I actually, like, when I first heard about this series, my expectation was like, this takes place in space, because I'm like, oh, he's like a star in the sky, not realizing that it was all actually like he's a starfish and it's underwater themed and all that stuff. So that was very surprising going into this, but I think that it's one of those Nintendo series that you're like, what is that? You know, like, you just don't have much representation, and I don't feel like many people have played or talked about it. And so it was very nice that they're kind of bringing awareness to it again and being like, oh, right, you probably only know this from a Smash Brothers trophy from like years ago, but here it is, and now you can check it out. I think maybe it was Melee. There was a Starfy trophy as well. I can't remember. There was definitely, I mean, Famicom Detective Club was in Melee. That's where I first heard of that, and I was like, what the hell is this? This seems weird. And then Nintendo put out a sequel to that this year, so that's crazy. But yes, I definitely encourage people to check out this. But if you can do the fan translation, I think that's probably the best way to go with it, because you might get a little bit lost. Now, I think you can get through it in Japanese. It's going to take a little bit of kind of like brute force, but not too much. So very charming little game, and very glad to have checked it out. So thanks, Nintendo, for reminding me it existed, and then making me not use the system that I actually pay a subscription for, and instead downloading it illegally and playing it somewhere else. So, yeah, that worked out great. Fantastic. All right. Next up, number 4. Matt, what do we got?
My number 4 is God of War Ragnarok.
Oh, wow, okay.
Because for some reason, with the 2 modern God of War games, I always fall off of them. So I bought it when it came out, and then I played it, and I had a really good time, and I just stopped playing it and didn't go back to it until this year. But, there's genuinely not a lot I can say that hasn't already been said. It's such a spectacle of a game. It is, it's AAA at its most AAA, if that makes sense.
Just so lavish, right? Like, the money is on screen everywhere. You can see the money in it. Yeah, absolutely. But also, like, really, it does sort of like old school level design, which I find really interesting. Everything's still quite like tightly packed. You're still doing that classic thing of like walking around one corner because you don't think it's the main path, and it's not, and then you find a chest and there's something extra, and then you go back onto the main path. Really small stuff like that I found really satisfying in recent years in games. Just like the stuff that keeps your brain ticking over in terms of constantly looking out for new stuff. The puzzle levels, like, really good in this. Obviously, the slightly annoying thing that everyone's spoken about that's finally been fixed of characters like suggesting the answer within seconds. Yeah, it got patched recently. You can basically turn that off now.
Really?
Which I think would be a much better way to play, because it is frustrating when you're like, okay, I'm starting to get a feel of this landscape. I can do this, and you've got Atreus in the background being like, hey, you can freeze that geyser, and you're like, okay, I was nearly there, mate. Come on, like, give me a second. But yeah, so fantastic. And it's funny for a game like this. It's so combat focused, and when you think about the first game as well, everything was built around the axe for a big chunk of the game, and then you get the Chains of Olympus, and with this game, even getting one new weapon with the spear felt like such a big deal, and it was such a different play style. Like, it was fantastic to use. And the combination of that, the getting a brand new weapon, which is with a whole new skill tree, and getting Atreus as a playable character, it feels like a really classic sequel. New playable character, new weapon, new sort of like gods to fight. It feels very old school in its approach there, but then its storytelling is still just like a proper step up from the first God of War. Less personal. Like, the first one was very much Kratos and Atreus' journey, but this one takes on a wider look at things, has more character development across multiple characters, and some really genuinely, like, a twist in there that got me, which I don't see a lot in narratives these days. I not to like sit here and be like, I'm really fucking good at this, but like, I normally can see like a twist coming.
Sure.
Like, I'm normally the one like
yeah, I mean, you probably have the media literacy to to see it playing out.
Yeah, I'm normally nudging someone and being like, you know what I reckon, and then 2 hours later, like, being right about it. And yeah, so I found that, and yeah, it's a really fantastic game. Potentially a little bit bloated, which, there's long segments where you're Atreus sometimes that feel like, sometimes you're like, I just want to get back into the action a bit. And if you try and do everything in this game, like, the pacing of the story gets a bit lost. A lot of optional stuff where if you end up doing it, it's like you have moments where you're like, aren't we supposed to be like doing something quite important? And you're like, well, yeah, but we've got a whole big area to explore here, which it can struggle with at times, but I still think it's such an accomplishment. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I think it's better than the first game. Like, I binged this game in like 4 days, I want to say. It was like a full weekend, and then like after work I just no-lifed it, essentially, just fully devoured everything. I was so compelled by there's such a variety of like places you go in this one, and like characters that you interact with, but also like the changes in gameplay when you're switching styles and stuff like that. I think it really carries it strongly, and yeah, I feel like there's there's stuff in there that really knocked me for six in terms of its storytelling and what it does at the end. So yeah, tremendous game that I thoroughly enjoyed. And for me, it's like kind of the best of the best when it comes to Sony stuff, because I do find myself in recent years kind of being a bit done with their style, their approach to game design. But I feel like God of War is like the one series that still has that, like, it's like you were saying, Matt, like they still have that kind of video game-ness to it that is still kind of pulling me through, of like finding the chests or like doing the environmental puzzles. There's a Zelda energy to God of War that I appreciate 100%. That kind of like keeps me in it for sure.
That's fascinating. I'm the same as you, Matt, where like I first picked up God of War 2018 in 2018, and I think I got to the Elfheim area and then just fell off of it. And about a year or so ago, like right before the release of Ragnarok, because I wanted to try and finish the first game, I got all the way up to a little bit after the point when you get the Blades of Chaos and fell off it again. So I really would like to go and finish up 2018 and play Ragnarok, because it does look awesome. Did you play that that free DLC like roguelike expansion they did to it? Because that
Valhalla?
Cool. Yes, Valhalla. It looked interesting to me.
Yeah. Everyone has said it's amazing. I have yet to play it. Bally played it pretty immediately and was a big fan of it, and I have not gone around to it, but I really do want to play it.
If you know me, roguelike is that's my shit.
Your activation code.
Yeah, it is.
It was already out by the time I finished Ragnarok, and I sort of had, like, as much as I enjoyed it, I was like, I don't want to play more of it right now. Yeah. Like, I feel like I've hit my limit. But that's a good reminder, actually. I do need to go back to that and give that a try.
Yeah. I definitely have it on my list, so I'll get to it. Great. Devon, number 4 for you.
Yes, number 4. What is left on my... that's right. Okay, next up for me... So this is a game I actually I had played a little bit of before, but it never like quite sunk its teeth into me the way it has for other people. And it got a big ol' update this year, so I thought it was worth putting out there, and that is Stardew Valley. Did it... I'm assuming we've all played Stardew Valley. No,
I've not.
Yes,
you've not played Stardew Valley.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
I've not played Stardew Valley in the same way that I've not had crack cocaine.
Okay, I see.
So,
yeah.
Everything everyone says about it, I'm like, if I start this, I'm in trouble. So I may get around to it one day, but I worry that it will destroy my life. In the way that I've heard it has so many other people.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I mean, the game has evolved so much over the last 8 years that it's been out. I played it day of release when it came out on Steam.
I did too.
I think Dan Reichert had a video on Giant Bomb, and I watched that, and I was like, this seems like my shit. And so I played it. I was at uni at the time, and I think I played 70 hours in a week. Like, I barely did any work. Like, the only thing I could think or do was Stardew Valley. I forgot to eat a few meals because of Stardew Valley that week. So you're right, Matt. It's fucking dangerous as a game.
No, it is. I think I found out about Stardew Valley like day of, or at least week of release, because I believe Jim Sterling did some kind of preview on it,
right,
and that, I think that's how I found out about it. But so I had played it throughout the years, but I never quite like got into it as others did. But the big update came out. Did you return to it, NBZ, with the update, or no?
I have not. No, I've definitely been tempted to. I think Fields of Mystery are coming out this year. Kind of gave me a little bit of that instead. So I did check that out. It's very bizarre. So I booted up. Okay, so I booted up Stardew Valley this year for a very specific reason. Because I needed to capture footage of the intro, because we did a collaboration with Stardew Valley for Balatro.
That's right.
And part of that was this little sequence, the beginning of Stardew Valley. So I noticed. I was like, when was the last time I played Stardew Valley? And it was like 2017.
Wow.
So yeah, that was the first time I booted it up, and it was Yeah, it's changed a significant amount. I was worried. I was like, if I restart this game, will it kill my profile? So I was, we were chatting about if anyone else on the team had it or was able to capture it. I was like, well, I guess I'll just take the hit. Turns out it doesn't erase anything. You can just start a new farm. So that was great. But yes, that was the weird reason for me booting up Stardew Valley this year.
They added a ton of stuff in the update. It's pretty incredible. It's similar. It really is similar to a game like Terraria, where the value to money proposition is ridiculous, and they consistently do these huge updates that are just completely game changing. And if they charged $15 of DLC for this update or some of the ones they've done in the past, I think most people would gladly pay them. But no, that's
oh yes,
it's
absolutely.
free. It's free. Yeah, so it kind of finally sunk its teeth into me this year. I played about a full year. I'd like to go back and play more because there's a ton to do after that. There's the whole Ginger Island area, and there's more dungeons and things that they added. There's a whole there's a whole mastery system, so once you get all of your little skills up to 10, you can unlock stuff on top of that and other things throughout the island. So that's a whole thing. It's pretty incredible. And in particular, as someone who I do really enjoy those type of games, but I don't know, I guess either of your thoughts on this. I am someone who, especially looking back now, I tried to go back about a year ago. Animal Crossing New Horizons is not my favorite in the series. So playing a game like Stardew Valley that has a lot more of those progression elements, it has villagers that say more than 3 copy and paste lines as well as in New Horizons was awesome. I played this, I think the update came out spring to summer, which is a really nice time to play the game. It felt cozy then. So yeah, I mean, Stardew Valley, I think everybody knows this game at this point. It's one of those indie games that has surpassed video game nerddom. They're doing a Stardew Valley concert, where they play all of the songs from the game. I think it's their second year of doing it that they're gearing up to do right now. It's pretty outstanding.
Yeah, it sold over 30 million copies.
Yeah.
Which is that's big numbers. That's Mario Kart Wii numbers, which is
I know.
And
his new game, what is it? The Concerned Chocolatier, Haunted Chocolatier. It's Concerned Ape. That's what I was. Yeah,
that's correct. Yes.
it looks cool. I'm excited for that whenever that gets finished.
Yeah, 2030 at least, I imagine.
Yeah. 2030.
Take that and Hollow Knight Silksong.
That's
day.
Right. Yeah, same day.
Yep.
Half-Life 3.
One day.
Yep.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Great. All right, my number 4 is a little 3DS game that I've been meaning to play for a long time. It's called Attack of the Friday Monsters.
What the hell is that?
Video game from Millennium Kitchen, this studio makes a series called Boku no Natsuyasumi, which probably gained a bit more attention in the West through a video from Tim Rogers that was a 6-hour video essay about that series. And a lot of people kind of heard of it through him. But it's My Summer Vacation is
the series.
It's
those ones.
And essentially, yes, exactly, yes. And so there's the Doraemon, no, not Doraemon, the Shin-Chan one that came out recently. So these games are starting to get localized now, and they're doing the Shin-Chan version stuff. But Attack of the Friday Monsters was part of the 3DS Guild series. So there's the Guild 01 and Guild 02. And Guild 01 was basically a set of games made by well-known Japanese creators. Suda51 made a game called Liberation Maiden. There's a game called Aeroporter, Bugs vs. Tanks. There's a bunch. I bought all of these at the end of 3DS's lifespan. And Attack of the Friday Monsters is the one that most people hold in the highest regard. And it's essentially, you're this little kid and you run around this town and you are talking with lots of different characters, and it's very kind of chill in terms of there's not a lot going on. You're just kind of like wandering about, but there's this kind of specter in the background of like, ooh, on Friday the monsters are going to come, right? And there's a like thing in the town of everyone's kind of talking about it, and you're not sure if this is like a real thing or a supernatural thing, but it's very much like trying to capture that essence of childhood and that essence of like a summer vacation where it's nice outside and you're running around with people and you have nothing to do as a kid. And so obviously like I think it works better in like a setting of like the 80s or like something like that, where it's, you know, there aren't inside distractions for kids like there are these days. It's like all you have to do is like run around outside. There's nothing else you can do. And it's very charming in that way. I think it does a great job of like, every different screen you go to has a different camera angle, so it's almost reminiscent of kind of like a PS1 vibe of, you know, a lot of those games use that kind of fixed perspective to create different feeling and different kind of like, you know, I think it's a great way of kind of showing off this town and everything that's going on with it. And there's, I mean, gameplay wise, it's very light. There's this little kind of card game that you play with your friends, and that's kind of like the most gamey that it gets. But for the most part, you just kind of run around this town and soaking in the atmosphere and the vibes, and has a nice little story to go along with it. It's only like 3-4 hours long, but wonderful little game, uses the 3D very nicely, and has made me very interested in checking out more games in this series. I think it's a tone piece more than anything, right? It's very much like vibes driven kind of experience, and, you know, very light mechanically, but I think very charming, and has some very nice touches. So a series I definitely want to play more of and check more out in. But Attack of the Friday Monsters, no, you can't buy it anymore, so sorry about that. But I liked it, so there you go. Excellent. Okay, so top three. Let's get to it. Matt, what's number 3 for you?
Number 3 for me is Before Your Eyes.
Oh, great game.
Great game. Did you know that it's quite uncomfortable to cry in a VR headset? Because I do now.
Oh boy, okay, yeah. Oh, jeez, that's not great.
Yeah, so I played this on PSVR 2 because it's got the eye tracking technology in it that this game needs, because this game is controlled entirely through blinking. I believe you've talked about this on the podcast before, MBZ, right?
I have indeed, yes. I played it just on PC with my webcam, and so you set it up that way. But, you know, I think it seems like it was made for VR, honestly. It seems like the kind of experience that works perfectly. Aside from the crying situation, it feels like it was very much set up for it to work that way.
Yeah, it does. It feels it when you're in it, actually. Like having things like being immersed in the space like that does make you feel much like a big connection to the main character. And yeah, so for anyone who didn't listen to that one or has not played it, like, it is a game where you are basically given vignettes of someone's life from the time they're very young to till sort of being a teenager, and then a little bit beyond that. And to see a vignette, you need to keep your eyes open, and the moment you blink, after a sort of a set amount of time, the moment you blink, you will move on to the next scene. And there is like big chunks of scenes that you can miss, you know, lines of dialogue, interesting things if you blink too early, and it makes the game strangely stressful. But the life of the person you're in is strangely stressful. The parents are, you know, arguing a lot. There's some quite heartbreaking stuff in there, and I think if anyone grew up with parents who had high expectations of them, this game does really tap in to that. Like, it was something that I wasn't expecting to relate to that much, and then, you know, things happen, you go, well, you know, I've been here, I've felt that way before, and then it goes sort of beyond that, and I don't want to say too much about it. It's one of those games that not a lot of people will, I imagine, play it, because it's the point of entry. I mean, obviously webcam isn't too bad, but it's still just that little extra thing to make you play it. But
Yeah.
It goes to some really interesting places.
I believe it is on Netflix. So
is it really?
If you have an iPad, so if you've got an iPad, that's probably the easiest way because that has a front-facing camera, and so it's probably that's the most accessible way to play it, I would imagine, because I think a lot of people will have that. I wouldn't recommend it on a phone necessarily because it's a bit small of a screen, but an iPad I could see working quite well for this game.
I think it is worth it, and yeah, it has this sort of like this second story running through, a story about the afterlife, and which is really very interesting in itself, and it all really culminates in a quite emotional finale, and I'd say like 2 hours long, maybe, which was especially in a VR headset was just about the right amount of time. Like I didn't want to be in there for much longer, like tears or not, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's just about when you hit your limit.
But you also wouldn't want to stop playing this at any point. I couldn't imagine playing this for an hour, stopping and coming back to it. No, it is a game that it has a momentum behind it that you want to be in, and almost like the fact your eyes start to strain over the course of those 2 hours feels right. Like coming into it halfway through with fresh eyes again would almost be wrong. And again, I didn't realize this until now, but like a lot of my picks are quite like this wouldn't work anywhere else but a video game, and it's very true. Right? Like it works because of the context that it's in. And again, I've never played anything like it. I've never played a game that relies on something that is out of your control. Like unless you are the world champion staring contest. Like you are gonna blink at this at a point where you were not expecting to blink because you don't think about blinking this much in your life.
There's an inevitability to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that inevitability plays into the inevitability of kind of the narrative that plays out, right? Which I think is it's beautifully mirrored.
Yeah, you put it better than I could, honestly. Like it works on a level that I've not seen anything work on before. More experience than video game, like potentially, but one that I'd highly recommend having.
Absolutely. I think it's tremendously well done, and it can get a little funky at times, at least with the webcam it could get slightly, but I think probably like the way that it's been updated now and with the VR version, I think that is probably the best way to play it if you can. There is a specific moment at the end where you deliberately have to close your eyes, and that moment will stick with me for a long time. Like the way that works and the way that like the sound changes with that as well, like that. It's really tremendous stuff. So I can see why it's so high up your list.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
Lovely. Devon, number 3.
Yes, number 3. Okay, so number 3 here. A game I know you have heard of, NBZ, is Balatro.
Oh,
it's time to talk about it. You've heard a little something about it.
A little bit, yeah.
I think you were saying this is coming out in December, but at the time of recording, it has been, I'm assuming, a very busy week for you because it was just nominated for a slew of game awards. So congrats. Congrats.
Yep. Thank you. Yep.
Very normal time.
Very mad.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see the reception that this game has gotten. It really feels like it's taken off in a way that, I would say only sort of elite selection of indie games have. So congrats to you guys. Congrats to what's his name? Local Thunk, right?
Local Thunk, yeah.
Local Thunk, yes. But Balatro, I really do think deserves all of the praise that it gets. I remember you sent me this game, there was a play test like a year ago, I think.
There was we had a demo, that came out end of last year.
You had a demo about a year ago,
and
you sent it to me, and you said, you think that this has potential to be one of the best games that you guys had ever handled, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. Roguelite, it's speaking, it's interesting to me.
I sent it to you specifically because you are like the roguelike boy, right? And I think this is interesting because I've talked to you before about how like I don't think I would have gotten into roguelike deck builders like Slay the Spire if not for you pushing them on me. And so like in a weird way, the genesis of me being like we should sign this game starts with you telling me to play Slay the Spire, right? So
that is wild to think about.
Yeah.
But
now you need to ask for your monetary cut of that.
Exactly. Yeah,
I would love that. I would love that. But yeah. So you sent me the demo for this, I believe, about a year ago, and I was like, wow, okay, this is cool. There's definitely something here. And then in the weeks, leading up to Balantro's release, I was seeing it everywhere. In particular, I'm a really big Northern Lion fan. I watch a lot of Northern Lion. And he was like fawning over this game, and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be something special. And I think you may have sent me a code a week or two early, so I got to play it a little bit early. But yes, Balantro is amazing. I mean, it really is like sort of the game journalist's darling game of 2024, I would say, and I do mean that as a compliment. It really does feel like a lot of journalists around the industry all just agree that this game does something special. There are so many different builds that you can tackle, and the game, it doesn't really explicitly even teach you about the builds. You just sort of have to come across them naturally as like you work with different jokers. The music is awesome. It's like weird and hypnotic, but it puts you in this trance-like state that is sort of perfect for roguelikes. It's infinitely replayable, and I'm really excited. Actually, I have not checked out the game since those 2 packs of crossover characters have come out. In particular, I know they crossed over with what probably is my favorite game of all time, The Binding of Isaac. I'm really excited to take a look at that.
Oh, you are the roguelike liker, I see.
Yes! You do not want to know how many hours I have in The Binding of Isaac. It is too much.
Yeah, Devon, you've got like what, all 1,000 something achievements in Binding of Isaac?
Actually, I don't now because the new update just came out.
Oh, because they updated it with new stuff. Oh shit!
They added 3 achievements, so I have to go and get them. But yes, I do. And 100%ing Isaac, for any of the lunatics out there like myself that have done it will know it is a task. There is some very difficult stuff you got to do, but I've done it. But Balatro is awesome, and it really does hang out in that upper echelon of especially now, almost a year after release. Because if I remember, it came out like February-ish this year. It was the beginning of the year,
end of February.
Yeah. So getting close to a year that it's been out. So some time to let it simmer, sit and think on it, and I really do feel it belongs in that upper echelon of roguelites. I'm really excited to play some more. You gave me a code for the mobile version, which I've downloaded, but resisted the temptation because I know if I start playing that, it's just gonna be all I do. I'm my bathroom breaks are gonna turn into 30-minute adventures.
Yeah. yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
I'm really pleased that the Balatro mobile doesn't have a vertical setting yet. Because that would kill me.
Yeah.
Just the fact I do have to turn it around maybe puts me off a little bit. Just I'm like, okay, that's a bit of a commitment. But if that ever goes vertical, I'm dead. I picked it back up recently on Switch, and I forgot how rare it is that we have a game that has the ability to manipulate time itself.
Yeah.
Like it is the time melter. I don't understand what happens. I was gonna say something to do with the music. And the ever so slight CRT effect on it, that and the slight wobble and the slight coming in at the edges of the screen, and you find yourself in it, and you do 5 or 6 runs. And I've got it going at the fastest speed as well. You pick a hand and it's flying up, and hours still just go past, and you're like, have I accomplished anything? I've done one of the extra colours, I think, and then incredible. Brilliant stuff.
I do really love how that game handles difficulty as well. Like the sort of incremental building. It's very similar to how Slay the Spire does it with the Ascension system, but it works super well for these type of games. And also I think thematically, like the whole trance-like state that you get when playing Balatro is perfect for a game about, gambling. Or sitting in like a casino. Yeah. It feels like it's just it's a very, very special game. You guys should feel proud. I think it will perform well at the Game Awards, but even if it doesn't, you guys have got something.
By the time this goes out, I think that will have happened. So,
I guess they will have happened. Yeah, I guess
probably no. Yeah,
it's no, it's awesome.
It's been a wild year, puts it mildly. I'll say. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I knew it was very good. Like when we signed it, obviously, I was like, the card game sickos will like this. I think it just stunned me that it went so far beyond that group. I was like, roguelike people are here for this. But then the whole world was, and I was like, wait, what? When did that happen? That was.
Well, I really do think what it is. It's the hook of the game where, I guess not everybody, but most people know how to play poker. So having that basis in there, or at least understanding poker hands, made it probably accessible to a crowd who, it really does seem like it's hit an audience of people who not only, do they not necessarily maybe play indie games, but they don't play roguelites at all, so right, going into that, yeah, it's I don't know, it's incredible. It's a very special game, and I love it a lot. I would not be on this list, otherwise.
Lovely. Well, let's get to my number 3. Hey, do you hear about a 6 out of 10 Metroidvania? I've got another one for you.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I played a game called After Image earlier this year. This is it's just like the most like Metroidvania. You play as like an anime-looking protagonist, and I don't really remember any of the story in this. It was very much a like every night before bed I would play this. And I would put on a podcast, and the maps are just massive. They're like maybe too big, but it's one of those things of like filling in a map is therapeutic, and the movement feels really good. I think for me, if you have snappy movement and just like a decent enough combat system, I will just run through you and have a good time. And that's exactly what After Image is. Like it has this like light anime aesthetic, which is quite nice, and like I do think it's pretty. I think it has like a very kind of like not painterly look to it, but it definitely has an aesthetic that is relatively nice, and it runs very well, and it's very much like, okay, getting different weapons, changing those stances. It's got a bit of Castlevania in it. It has more of the experience level stuff where you obviously you level up and you upgrade your stat tree, and you improve your proficiency with certain types of weapons, and there's a whole big skill tree going on with it. There's a whole weird section where like I got to the edge of a map and I got on a boat, and all of a sudden it's like in SteamWorld Heist 2 where it's like the boat overworld and you're moving around, and I was like, what the fuck, in a Metroidvania? It was very strange. And so like the map opens up and suddenly you're going to islands, and I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense, but yeah, it all kind of comes together, and I think it very much is. It's just a good time if you want to switch your brain off and run through and hit things with a stick. I think I'm going to say tweeted now, even though we're all on Blue Sky. Tweeted is the word, and it's not going to be taken away from us. But I tweeted like, sometimes all you've got to do is just like run around and hit a monster with a stick, and that's what Dragon Quest is, and that's why Dragon Quest is great.
Yes, it is.
And I feel like After Image is like the definition of like the Castlevania branch of Metroidvanias, which is I could wander around for an evening and not accomplish anything, but I've leveled up like 3 times because I hit enough enemies on the way while I was doing it. So you never feel like your time is wasted in that sense. That's kind of like why I do like the Castlevania branch of Metroidvanias, in that kind of RPG progression. Just really, it ticks away at your brain, and it makes it very satisfying. And double jump, air dashes, it's got the whole shebang. It's got some cool boss fights, and just satisfying to run through and play that. So After Image, again, I think Fist honestly has a stronger identity, and I'd probably remember more about Fist in the future. but the jankiness of it kind of holds it back. Whereas After Image it has a fluidity to it, and it has a kind of a cleanness that I appreciate in these games. And yes, I like it quite a lot. So there's number 3 for me.
I still can't believe that game is called Fist. Every time you say it.
Yeah. It's
it has to
be.
A choice. How else would they get the words Forged and Shadow Torch in there?
That's right.
Yeah.
These things just happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Matt, number 2 for you.
Number 2 is Ape Escape. Ape Escape is wicked.
Let's go.
Oh, hell yeah.
I really like Ape Escape.
The first one?
Yeah, the first one on PS1. So this is all because of Astrobot.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, like it really got me into like looking at Japan Studios like backlog, and it's always something that I missed out on, but I really wanted to like dive back into. So I've played a little bit of Gravity Rush this year. Not Japan Studio, but I played bloody Jumping Flash on the PS1.
Yeah.
Which is like a weird game. Like I had a good time with it. I finished it, but like a weird one. But Ape Escape is really good. It's a really high quality 3D platformer with like level design sensibilities that are a little bit more Zelda, or like somewhere between like Zelda and the first Banjo-Kazooie. In terms of like levels being like quite wide and open, and you with puzzles involved that you need to do to be able to get to certain levels of it. And they tend to sort of like loop back on each of themselves. The thing that's most known about the first Ape Escape, which I think is interesting, is it's the dual analog stick thing, right? So when Sony were making the first DualShock with the dual analog sticks, they were like, well, how are we going to sell people that they need a right analog stick? Because camera controls weren't synonymous with that at this point. Like, that just wasn't a thing. Ape Escape does not use the right stick for camera controls. Ape Escape uses the right stick for a load of gadgets. And it's one of the most Nintendo things that I've ever seen not come out of Nintendo. The first 2 that you're given are just a club to hit monkeys with. Because, like, why not? These monkeys are in the wrong time. They've travelled through time to the wrong eras of time, and now you've got to hit these monkeys with a club. Fantastic. Like, best setting for a game ever. Ideal. There shouldn't be a monkey in the dinosaur times. Hit him with a club. And then, once you hit him with a club, you got a net. And both of these things are used by flicking the right analog stick. So you can be running forward with the left analog stick, but if a monkey runs behind you, you flick back on the right analog stick, and you'll immediately turn and hit behind you. So this is with the stun club and the net that you use to catch monkeys. But then beyond that, you can see where they're doing like Nintendo stuff. So you get like a slingshot at one point, and to do that, you pull back on the right analog stick to pull back the slingshot, and then you release it to let it go. You get a radar for finding monkeys, which you just sort of like, you swing around in a circle until it starts lighting up, and then you hold in that direction to see where you are. You get a hula hoop, which lets you dash at high speed. So you just like spin the stick as fast as you can to make you go faster. And you get a helicopter to push you higher in the air. So again, you prick that weapon, you spin the stick, and it gives you like a double jump essentially. And then if you keep spinning it, you slowly float back down to the ground. Probably the most like inventive one is the RC car, which is just a case of you move yourself with the left stick and you move the RC car with the right stick throughout the level separately. And often like the RC car will be going under the level below you to hit a switch as you go forward. That's what it's most well known for, and that's what I've always heard about it, and it always felt a bit gimmicky. I've been playing this on the Vita, and I honestly think it might be the best place to play it, because with a little analog stick on the Vita, you're not having to do too much movement. I couldn't imagine doing this with like a full-size controller. I think it would like hurt your thumbs eventually. But like on the Vita, a little like flick of the little stick, and it's ideal. But this is all combined with like genuinely like some of the best level design I've seen on the PS1. Like I said, I talked about Tomb Raider earlier, and that has like, it has good level design, but Ape Escape like knocks it out of the park. Like it's Mario 64-esque in places, and in some places I think better, which is not a compliment that I'd like pay without genuinely thinking it. I loved exploring the levels. It was really interesting to like find all of the monkeys. And also it has like almost a Metroidvania thing where there's some monkeys that you cannot get the first time you do a level until you get a gadget on a later level, and you have to come back and use it to come and get the monkeys if you want to do 100%. And yeah, I think it's brilliant, but it's also one of the only games that I've played in a long time that gets better as it goes on. The best levels of this are the last 3 or 4, because they're these really, once you know the game and you've got all the gadgets, they're these really expansive, much more Zelda-style levels that, like, they feel so complex to explore. And I think if you only played like an hour of this, I think you come away being like, oh, I get it. It's like the gimmicky monkey catching game. Like the very first level of it, there's 3 monkeys and you're in a space that's probably the size of the inside hall of Mario 64. Like, is nothing at all, and you'd be like, okay, I get it. But when you stick with it and you get to the later levels, like it just gets better and better. And so many games are front loaded with like some of the best stuff.
Yeah.
For this to be the other way around to that is super impressive. And I've gone on to play Ape Escape 2 recently, and it just doesn't hit the same way. Like, it's not as much of a platformer. This is
I'm
much
sensing a
more
theme
of a...
here, Matt.
I know. There's been
the old games you're going back to.
There's been a few of those.
The other 2 I'm not confident with. Like, the other 2 I'm like, I prefer these, but I'm probably wrong. This one I'm like, no, I'm right. Ape Escape 1 is brilliant.
Okay.
Ape Escape 2 is like not as good.
How many are there? There's like 4, I think. I don't...
Yeah, there's 4 main ones, I think, and then there's some slightly odd ones. There's like not a VR one. I think there's a PlayStation Move one.
Oh wow! Okay.
It's typically been used
Move.
it's typically been used to show off their new tech, basically.
Right.
But playing, so yeah, obviously playing Astrobot on this level was what made me do this, and playing this, you do see a lot of you can see a lot of where Astrobot gets his stuff from. Like, collecting all the bots throughout a level is very similar to like collecting all the apes.
Yeah.
And as much as I love Astrobot, I would love to see Asobi get given an Ape Escape to do. Like,
I mean, it seems like it's a non-zero chance that happens, just based on things that they've said, and clearly, I mean, if you play Astrobot, they clearly have love for all of these games that they're, representing in Astrobot, but it seems like they've got a little bit of, preferential treatment for Ape Escape.
Yeah, I would not. I would not be. I would not be surprised to see them do it. I think, like you say, I think it's a low chance, but there's not a no chance.
Yeah.
And I absolutely fell in love with this. And I was not expecting it at all. I just wanted to try it out to see like what it was like. And I by the time I got to the end of it, it's one of my favorite games in years. Like, fantastic.
You've sold
really,
me on
really
this.
good.
I gotta put this on the Steam Deck or something, because that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Just make sure your analog sticks are up to scratch.
Yeah, I was definitely thrown off when I booted this up, and I was like, wait, I can't turn the camera with the stick. What's going on? Like, it was. I was like, uh-oh, what do I
Is it a shoulder button camera game? Is it one of those?
I don't even know if it is. I think it's... No. There's a button you can press to, like, do a first-person view, and you sort of look around like that. But for the most part, the camera just sort of turns with you. It's designed well enough. Like, you very rarely are in a situation where you're like, oh, I cannot see where I'm going.
Yeah.
It's just that, like you say, when you're first playing it and you first boot it up and you're like, well, the whole point of this game is that I'm looking around for apes and I can't control the camera. Like, it does feel weird at first, but it becomes less of a problem going on the more you play.
I will again. I'll add it to the list.
I am slightly terrified you're going to play it and think it's awful. But
no, that's inevitable. This is how it works. But I think I do want to get over that hump, because I think I started it and I was like, oh gosh, I've got to put a lot of mental energy into this to do it. Especially with Steam Deck, like, setting up controls can just take a bit of a faff sometimes.
True.
So I just need to do that, set it up, and then once it's all set, then I think I'll be good to go. But yeah.
Well, it's okay, because you're a Mario Sunshine hater, so your opinions on
That's
platformers,
true, yeah.
they're they're.
No, I know.
do you know if you got the American or the European version?
Oh, it's a good question.
Because I think
can't remember.
I think you'd prefer the American version because it runs faster. It's the 60 versus 50 hertz thing.
Okay.
But it's got it's got the worst voice acting. The English, the UK voice acting, because it's one of the few games that's localized differently in America and the UK.
Wow. Oh my god.
The UK voice acting is brilliant. I genuinely love it. The villain in it is like he's played by like a Shakespearean actor, or at least he's got that vibe about him. So he's like, I cannot believe you found me. Whereas the American voice acting is like nowhere near as good.
That's a real shame.
So if you do play the American one at some point, go and watch the UK scenes on YouTube or something, because it's quality stuff.
Or I find a way to mod the US version with the British voices in
there
it.
You go.
I've given you more Steam Deck stuff to do for it.
There's probably a patch
so much
for
tinkering. There probably is. I wouldn't be surprised. Wonderful. Well, I look forward to much tinkering in my future. Devon, what's your number 2?
Okay, number 2. So last of the, the way I structured my list, last of the non-2024 games is Dark Souls 3. I had never played Dark Souls 3 before. I had played 1 all the way through. I had played about half of 2 and bounced off it, which is pretty typical of Dark Souls 2. And I've had 3 sitting in my Steam library for several years at this point, but right before Shadow of the Erd Tree came out, I think like a lot of people, I was feeling myself, I'd say similar to a series like Pokemon, where maybe once a year I'm like, God, I could really kill for a Pokemon game right now. It's like, man, I could really kill for like a Miyazaki Dark Souls style game. So I played through Dark Souls 3 all the way through. I actually have to finish up the DLC because
nice.
The end of the first DLC has probably the hardest boss I've ever seen in a Souls game, which is saying something. For those of you who have played it, it's the
second DLC is not any easier. I'll tell you that.
No, I know.
You might have a harder final boss to come.
I know. So MVZ, this final boss, it's an Ornstein and Smo situation where you have 2 characters that you're bouncing between, and it's not 2 phases; it is a 3-phase fight. So
it's the first 3-phase fight of any of these games. Like literally the first one they ever did.
Wow.
So you do phase 2 and you go, "Oh, I've done this." And they go, no.
Yeah, just kidding.
Oh boy! Oh my god!
It is an incredible spectacle, but Jesus, it is hard. And I decided to go with a faith build because I really enjoy faith builds in these games. And faith, I think, is probably the weakest it is in the series in Dark Souls 3. So I don't know, it's not made things any easier, but I really enjoy the game. I think, the game journalist opinion, right, is that Dark Souls 1 is the best in the series, which I think in terms of world design, you really can't deny. The world design in 1 is really cool, just how it, it's almost like a Metroid game in some ways, where it loops in and onto itself, and it's very cool. But in terms of, like, the ethos of the series, if that makes any sense, I really do feel that 3 is the strongest. The individual level design in 3 is really, really good. There's also a huge variety of areas. It's probably the largest variety in terms of, like, the types of environments that you're going to be in the entire series, which is awesome. And you can tell that it really was the basis for Elden Ring, and I mean that from like a literal sense. I believe it's running on the same engine. Like the weapon arts they introduced 3 is very similar to some of the stuff they had in Elden Ring and the Ashes of War. It's an awesome game. The only unfortunate part about me playing Dark Souls 3 was, I got 40 hours or whatever into that, and then Shadow of the Erd Tree dropped, and I was like, well, now what? So I haven't played Shadow of the Erd Tree, even though I own it. I gotta play it. This probably next year, but yeah.
I've got such a soft spot for Dark Souls 3. I think it's fantastic, and I think the level design thing about Dark Souls 1 is true, and it is undeniable. But Dark Souls 3, like, it improves on Dark Souls 1 in so many ways, and people forget about, like, there are some really bad areas in Dark Souls 1, like stuff that is literally unfinished. But I can't think of anywhere in Dark Souls 3 that was, like, everywhere in Dark Souls 3 feels perfectly made. Even the poison swamp in Dark Souls 3 is, like, it's made
cool,
to challenge you in exactly the right way. Yeah, like, those horrible goat monsters and the big tree guys, and then... But once you work your way around it and you found all the items and stuff, you're like, okay, this is fine. And then you get one of the best boss fights of the game immediately after. It's such a good game. I replayed it recently, a couple of years ago, maybe. Did like a full Dex build of it, and I adore that game.
No, Dark Souls 1 is one, and I know you actually can speed run this area very quickly, but you're probably not going to do that on a first playthrough. That whole game goes down at least 1 point for me with the whole fire area in the back half of the game. The Bed of Chaos is the worst boss fight, if you can even call it that, in the entire series. I think it's unfortunate because that game was very clearly unfinished in a few different places, but it's still a an all-timer for sure. But I agree. Like, if you were to ask me right now, would you rather go and play Dark Souls 3 or Dark Souls 1? It's almost not even a debate. It would be Dark Souls 3. Probably pretty close to 100% of the time.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see what you think of that second DLC as well. Like, very cool stuff.
I'm excited. It is cool too, having played Dark Souls 1. Like, there's a ton of references to Dark Souls 1 throughout the entirety of 3. Almost to an extent where it's like, wow, it's almost a little too much, but it is cool. You got to play more, NBZ, because you've only played Elden Ring, right?
I know. I think Elden Ring definitely opened my eyes to this series. I think it did for a lot of people. And yes, I keep seeing all these like games inspired, and I'm like, oh, Liza P looks interesting, but I'm like, should I really play that before I play the actual Souls games? Like, it feels wrong for me to like do that. So I definitely should be getting around to the original. I think original Dark Souls is probably the best place to go once I go back and finish Shadow of the Erdtree, because I also am,
to be honest, I might recommend 3, because there is some stuff in particular, like early on in 1. I don't know, there is some stuff in 1 that feels a little bit more dated in comparison to 3. I know you're not the horror guy, but I think Bloodborne is the best of all of these games.
Know, everyone fucking look. I'm too scared of Bloodborne.
It's not. It's scary.
I'll just wait until they make it 60 frames per second and on PC. Right, that'll happen. So just keep waiting for that.
I also fear that you might despise the blood vial system. It's always been my concern.
I mean, that is. That is the.
I already know I will despise that.
If they do some kind of re-release, they need to adjust that a little bit, because that is the biggest flaw in the game for sure.
But I've grown to love that loop around Central Yarnum now, where you do the blood vials. Like,
yes,
that's my podcast game. It's just farming blood vials for 45 minutes.
Yeah. I feel like if it does eventually, which it will, and like at least in the next 10 years it'll come to PC.
Especially if
someone will mod that in, right? Someone will make a mod that's like, well, you don't need to do that anymore. So
I mean, I think I'm hoping this doesn't actually happen. Like, I would think probably all of us are, but especially if Sony is actually purchasing From Software, I would think that it would have to happen at that point. No, like there would have to be some kind of Bloodborne re-release.
I think so.
Either that or they shut them down. One or the other.
Yeah, right. They get him to work on Concord 2 or whatever.
Oh my goodness. Great. Well, yes, I will continue my Souls journey. It will happen. But yes, I'm still only 9 hours into Tree, so I need to finish that first. But that will happen eventually. Okay, my number 2. It's a game I actually played last weekend. That kind of like I really enjoyed. A quick hit, a classic that I wanted to play because there's a sequel coming out. That is Pony Island, the first game from Daniel Mullins.
Was that?
Obviously best known at this point for Inscription. Pony Island's a super interesting game. I think it's really interesting in that it came out a very long time ago, and I think it still feels quite like modern in its design approach, in the idea that like there's a lot of meta stuff going on with it, and it kind of breaks player expectations. I think I can understand why it was so innovative for its time, right? Ultimately, Pony Island, like the main core gameplay loop is you're playing the Google game when Google breaks, and it's like the dinosaur jumping over the stuff, the T-Rex. That's the game. You're a pony and you jump, and eventually you get like a laser beam that you can shoot, and eventually you get wings that you can hover with. But the fundamental thing is that. But it's the way that they frame it, the way that they like. You start and it's like it's similar in a way to Inscription, right? In that like you're basically working on this, you're playing this machine, and so you can see like the frame of the it's like an arcade machine almost. You can see the frame outside, you can see the reflection of your character in it, and it's just everything keeps going wrong. Of like, you just start clicking on things, and item icon or menu icons just start falling apart, and like you start putting them back together, or you go into options and there's a hidden secret thing you need to click that opens up a secret menu, and so just like starting the game in the first place is like this point and click adventure style thing, but within the UI of this fake arcade machine, and it is like, it's very much that brand of storytelling where it's done through, you know, the kind of like computer talking to you. You have like this message system coming up of like someone being like, we need to get rid of this virus. You don't listen to the other person talking to you, right? Like it's a fake interface kind of game, which we've had quite a bit of in the last few years. I think Hypnospace Outlaw, which I also played this year, is very good. It didn't make my list, but that game is very much about like user interface and classic 2000s PC and like old website design, and kind of like reading through stuff and kind of piecing a story together through just like all the stuff on somebody's desktop or the pages that they have open, and this feels like a very early version of that, but then kind of pairing that with the whole, you know, the gameplay system where you're jumping over things and you're like hacking things, so you're like, oh, now my laser works much better, and there's this kind of like puzzle system to it where it's like this key just kind of like goes down this line, and you basically have to move inputs of like, I want it to go left, then down, then right, and then reset it. There's like a teleport one that comes into it. You're basically moving this key to like get it into the right position. Feels like a little bit of like coding stuff, a little bit minorly put in there, but in more of a puzzle way. So it looks like you're coding something, but you're actually doing kind of like simple puzzles to like get it to work. And it's very effective. I think it moves between gameplay modes quite frequently, and it's only like 2 hours long, so nothing really overstays its welcome. But it feels quite ahead of its time, and you can definitely see the through line from this to, I haven't played the Hex, but I've heard good things about that, which is his second game, which not many people played, and then obviously Inscription, which very much takes that to the nth degree, but then also has this incredible card game layered over the top of it, which itself is like very mechanically rich and deep. And I remember seeing the trailer at the Game Awards last year for Pony Island 2, and ProZD is in it, and I'm like, oh, he's great, I love him. And I was like, this is so bizarre and weird, and I was like, I feel like I should just at some point just sit down for 2 hours and play the original, because I know it's not long, and I know it would be good to have that context for when the second one comes out, because I'm sure, you know, the second one feels like a big step up because it's after he's made Inscription. It feels like it's going to be significant as a sequel. It's not going to be a 2 hour thing. It's going to be probably like a 10-hour thing, and I think it's going to be much more in depth and probably go even wilder. So yeah, very much a preparation for that, but while doing so, I found that I really enjoyed it. So nice. Yeah, definitely, if you've not checked out Pony Island, I think it's very approachable, very cheap these days, and you can play it very quickly. So there you go. All right, here we are. It's number one. Matt, what is your number one game?
My number one, and I genuinely don't think this will be that surprising when people hear it, it's Astrobot Rescue Mission.
Oh, okay.
It's the VR one, right?
VR game. Which is the most Nintendo game that Nintendo never made. Like, by some distance. Obviously, I played...
Even more so than the new Astrobot,
considerably more so. Like, it feels... The new one is a really cool platformer that I think is incredibly well designed and does like some cool stuff with the DualSense.
Right.
Rescue Mission is so heavily built around VR. It's like so heavily built around VR that it just could not work. You can see them having fun with like new ideas constantly throughout. Even Astro's little laser feat that he does when he hovers, right? You can see when you're playing Rescue Mission that was created for this, for VR, for the depth perception of like sometimes you're looking up at Astro, sometimes you're looking down. You need to know where you're going to land because he's sort of like moving all around you, and like those laser legs are made for VR. And every level plays around with the idea that something is like immersive or that you are in VR. There's one level that is proper Pinocchio style. You get eaten by a whale and it takes place inside of it. It's utterly brilliant, and it plays around with where you hold the controller as well. So beyond and where your headset is. So you are playing in the game. You are actually playing as a big robot. You're playing as a big robot that hovers behind Astro, and he has a DualShock 4 in his hands, and he has the big headset on his head, and that is what the robot looks like. And you as the robot, like if you sort of like are going left and right with your head, you'll see the shadow of your robot, little like nodding left and right, just doing his little thing. Like you are in the game, and Astro is separate to you, but you are controlling Astro, and it's the way he sort of like as Astro. The game is often built so he will zigzag across the screen. So at one point you'll be platforming in like the bottom left of the screen, so you'll be looking down to the bottom left, and then you'll create a set of platforms, and he will zig right up to the top right of the screen, and then he'll be walking on like a glass panel above you. So you'll be looking up and seeing his little feet like go across as he goes across this glass panel. And the controller in your hands frequently will turn into different things. So you'll find a box, you'll put the controller in. Suddenly the controller is a water gun, and you are controlling the water gun while you're also having to control Astro. Because that stuff is so motion controlled, you don't really think about VR being motion, but it feels very Nintendo Wii when you're moving the controller to shoot the water in different directions. There's one which is a grappling hook, which we've already discussed, makes the game a lot better, right?
Yeah.
It's a flick of the touchscreen up on the DualShock. So you flick the touchscreen up, it fires out a grappling hook, but you also need to be holding the controller in the right place for that to blink up. But if you find like a little hook, you can flick the controller, the grappling hook goes there, you create a line, and then Astro walks across it like a tightrope. And then if you flick the controller up in your hands, it will flick the rope so that it fires Astro into the air. Like, it's proper... Everything is very tactile, and even more so than, I'd say, than Astrobot, the new game. It's incredible. I love Astrobot, and I think Rescue Mission might have been a little bit more magical for me. I don't play a lot of VR stuff, so some of it might have been the novelty.
Bit of the afterglow, right?
Yeah, the novelty of VR, but like it's brilliant. It's constantly inventive in the way that the Astrobot games are. It constantly plays around with the fact that stuff is in VR, and a lot of the boss fights are the same enemies from Astrobot, the new game. But like the big gorilla, for example, like seeing him like towering over you in VR, you're like, oh, he's huge. And Astro is small in a way that you just don't get from the new Astro, and yeah, it's a real shame that this is stuck on, you know, the old PSVR that you now need an attachment for if you want to use it on a PS5. I happen to have it, and connecting it up is a pain in the ass. It's why I've not played it for ages. But after Astrobot, I was like, you know what, I'll finally get around to it. And
put in the effort, yeah.
Yeah, it's just brilliant. It's so good. I know Ballet's a big fan as well, and
huge evangelist of it, yeah, for sure.
I
did play like one level on his PSVR, and I really enjoyed it. The problem was obviously motion sickness because you are moving forward, the screen is moving forward, but you are not in real life, and so that's always the thing that causes motion sickness for me. So sadly, it's going to join the ranks of Outer Wilds and The Witness as other graveyard games that I'll never be able to enjoy because of the way that my brain processes movement. But that's how it goes, I guess.
I will say with that, I mean, it affects people in different strengths, right? But when I first, I got a Rift S right when the pandemic started, which a lot of people did because those things were impossible to find then. But when I first was getting into VR, I did find that forward movement really difficult. But after a few days of trying it out more with not making myself too sick, it kind of something clicks in your brain where you're like, okay, this is not real, and it's a little bit easier.
It's one of those things I would like to play, but it's just stranded right now.
Yeah,
right? It's so stranded, and hopefully they put it somewhere eventually, because I think yeah, more people should get the accessibility to play it. Yeah, it's a shame that people can't, but great, very, very glad to hear that, yeah, made your top spot. Makes a lot of sense, I think. All right, Devon, what is number one for you?
Okay, my number one, I alluded to it previously when I said, there'd be more Dragon Quest on this list. And that is the most recent game I've played on this list, but certainly not the most recent in terms of its origin, and that's Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake, formerly known as, I think we said the Seeds of Salvation.
The Seeds of
right?
Salvation.
Seeds of Salvation.
Yeah.
Yes. This game is something very special. I think it's truly brilliant. I have not played through Dragon Quest IV yet. I really would like to. It's another one of these JRPG series where I really, really want to go and play through at least all the numbered entries, because what I've played of Dragon Quest just absolutely, I don't know, there's something so special about this series that I feel like when I played 11 for the first time, I actually did play, I need to go back to it, but I played a little bit of 7 on 3DS, because I have 7 and 8 on cart, which I know is now worth a pretty penny. Those are pretty expensive games. Yeah, but
yeah, I bought them both on release because I just wanted to get through them, not realizing that they were going to end up being extremely rare and expensive games.
Yeah, but there's something that I for lack of a better word, there's something so magical about the Dragon Quest series. It really doesn't matter which entry. They all just have this, I don't know, this childlike wonderment, like, feel attached to them. That I play these games and it's like, I get it, Japan. I see what you guys see in them, because they're outstanding. They're in 3 in some ways is kind of the pinnacle of this, where they are as simple as or as complex as you want to make them too, from like a complexity standpoint, where 3 introduced what would be, I would argue, like one of the most revolutionary features in RPGs in general, and that's the whole class system, and with that, the reclassing system as well. This is before Final Fantasy 3 or 5 had done a very similar thing. And you can, you can take the basic party of mage, warrior, priest, and run through the entire game, not mess with that system at all, and you're going to be completely fine. But you can also be a sicko like me and like plan out all these different routes for characters and skills you want to pick up, and you have to hit certain levels to get certain abilities, and it's a ton of fun, especially as someone who's a Fire Emblem fan. The 3DS Fire Emblem games did that very well, where it's the sort of planning out the different routes of your characters to get different skills and abilities, which is a niche I always enjoy being scratched. And that is, I'm praising this game this much without talking about the things that Dragon Quest is always praised for, and that is the lovely soundtrack, really well orchestrated in this remake. To me, I have not played all of the HD 2D games, but to me, this is by far the best looking one, I would say, maybe along with Octopath.
I think, as someone who has played every single other HD 2D game, I think it is the prettiest, especially like going into the overworld and just walking over those sections and seeing the water and it glistening, and when you get to the ship as well, like it's very pretty. And I deliberately got this one on PC as opposed to on Switch, which I've played all the other ones on.
The frame rate helps, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I think so, at least. It's one of these games. If you don't have like a modern console or a great PC and you only have a Switch, by all means, you're gonna get the same experience. Go for it on Switch. But having that bump in resolution and also very smooth frame rate, I think does absolutely add to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm like 15 hours into it, and it's just very delightful.
Yes.
Like it's a game that is so easy to play, and just it's the simple pleasure of just running around and just like killing enemies, leveling up, getting new skills, and each town is just, it has its own accent, which is the thing I've always loved about Dragon Quest, is like the way that they write those dialects.
Well, it's very deliberate in this one.
Very deliberate, yes, because the entire world is just Earth. When you look at it, it's like, oh, that's just the shape of all these places, which I think is very cool when you realize that fact. But yeah, I think it's it feels like when you think of like what is the JRPG, like what is JRPG in your
Dragon
mind's
Quest.
eye?
Yes.
Dragon Quest 3 is like it. It's like the archetypical version. I think that's why so many games resemble this core formula, this core format, because it was the one that kind of blueprinted it to begin with.
No, I know, and it's incredible not having played Dragon Quest 3, before this remake, going through it and being like, this is where all these different games got these things from. It's true as the series as a whole, but the things. So as I was saying previously, I have not played 4, which is also a Famicom game, which is amazing that they were able to do that on the Famicom from a storytelling and structural perspective. But in terms of just like what they were able to do in terms of size of this game, and it's incredible. Because you have, for those who haven't played it, the first, I would say, about 10 hours, at least they were 10 hours for me, and it sounds like it was about the same point in time for you. Are pretty linear, right? It's pretty, there's some stuff you can do off the beaten path, but it's pretty linear until you get your ship. And once you get your ship, it becomes like an open world game, which is just crazy. There's so many different places that you can go and do and see things. It's just, I don't know. Dragon Quest just, there's nothing like it to me, and I am really excited to, first of all, for 1 and 2 remake. I think that'll be a lot of fun to go through next year.
Yes.
But also, play through the 4 through 6 trilogy. I'm very excited to check out 7 and 8, 9 one of these days. Although I know that's kind of tied up in the hardware.
9 was my first Dragon Quest.
Yeah. And to be honest, I'm not in the business of replaying games quite as much these days, but Dragon Quest XI is one of those games where every so often I'm like, man, I really want to do another another playthrough. That game is just so delightful. And I highly recommend checking out. There's something so comforting in Dragon Quest as well, I think, in this 3 remake, where you go to a dungeon. Final Fantasy is like this as well, the early games, and Ys, which I've been working my way through. Sometimes they'll go to a dungeon and it throws out all semblance of modern level design, where it'll just be like, oh, it's just like, it's not a path where, you have one main path with some side areas, although it does have that. Sometimes it'll just be like a completely open square that will have like rooms you can go into that have treasures. And you know what? Sometimes they don't have treasures. Sometimes it's just a room.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
There's just nothing there. And sometimes you go to a barrel and the barrel has specifically 437 gold and you're like, why that number specifically? Like that is it's very charming.
There's some barrels you'll go to because Dragon Quest has incredible exploration. I would say I do really enjoy Final Fantasy games. There's, things you could say Dragon Quest does better, things you could say Final Fantasy does better. I think Dragon Quest does the exploration aspect of things much better, at least in terms of like just walking around towns and hoping you see a prompt to hit the A button to find something. And you'll get prompts in Dragon Quest 3 remake sometimes on a barrel where there's almost always something that it's like, oh, you looked inside the barrel, but there's nothing of interest here. It's like, thank you, I really appreciate you deliberately adding that there.
I don't, Matt, have you been playing through Dragon Quest 3?
No, I've not actually. It's on my to get list. I do love them. I do, because I played 3 a couple years ago, the Switch version. So I do wonder if
the
it's
mobile,
like
the
mobile version that was ported to Switch. But I think it looks so pretty. I sort of want to jump on it. It's funny what you guys are saying as well. Like, it's so approachable, and like, I'm assuming both of you were big Pokemon guys
of
growing
course,
up,
yeah.
because like I think I think if you were a big Pokemon fan, Dragon Quest was always the JRPG that you jumped into and felt most comfortable.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Even when I'd only played like 2 Dragon Quest games, I felt like I'd been playing them for longer, and that's because I feel like Pokemon grabs so much from Dragon Quest.
Absolutely,
they feel like very similar vibes to jump into.
At least for me, I think you've expressed the same thing just from conversations we've had in BZ, but it goes as far as like the sound effect you get from walking through a door, that it's just, there's something that just warms your soul, right?
It's so brilliant that even in like Dragon Quest 11 in this beautiful 3D game,
it's the
you
same
walk through a door and
sound
it's like it's the same fucking sound effect. I'm like, it's brilliant that they just keep that the whole time. I love it.
Hopefully
very,
12
very
will come out eventually too.
Yeah, it will
Maybe.
come out at some point. And like you said, 10 is the white whale. I would love to play 10 at some point. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, well, my number one. Is it cheating? Maybe, I don't know. I wanted to represent like my journey to Japan this year and getting into rhythm games, and so I had a real withdrawal when I came back from Japan, because I was in these arcades and I'm playing my cabinets and I'm playing this fucking piano game, and like they're amazing, and I just wish I had more time to spend there and just like play all these songs and just this amazing hardware they have. And so there's a game on Steam called DJ Max Respect 5, which is it's basically as close as I could get to a Japanese arcade rhythm game, in that it is just like a 4-button rhythm game where it comes down a lane and you use your keyboard and like you use keys on the keyboard to play it. And it's the closest I can get to that feeling of being in a Japanese arcade again.
That's great.
It's really good fun. I mean, it has like tons and tons of songs. I bought it on sale. It's usually extremely expensive. It's like 40-50 quid, and it went on sale for like 10 or something during a Steam sale recently. And it's one of those things with rhythm games on Steam, you look at it and it's like, oh, there's like 300 pieces of DLC, like crossovers with like Falcom stuff, like Trails games, and I'm like, oh boy, this could be a real rabbit hole here if I go and buy all these DLCs and stuff like that. But it's been really nice to just like play through that, and just whenever I feel like I need an injection of like I want to be in a Japanese arcade playing one of those games. It's not the same thing, it's not the real thing, but it's as close as I'm gonna get until I get to go back there whenever I do, which I think says how much that stuff really impacted me. Like I think there's so many different weird arcade games when you walk around Japan and you go in there and it's like, here's some weird Gundam thing with like 5 analog sticks and 26 buttons, and this guy is just sitting there with like a meal on the side and just like absolutely just locked into this like insanely complicated arcade thing. And like so many of those games, like weird Dragon Ball games and like anime related stuff, and most of them are just so intimidating and just incomprehensible. And I think the nice thing about rhythm games is like music is a shared language, right? Yeah. Everybody, it's just so easy to understand, and there are so many different types of rhythm games they have there, from the taiko drums to the piano ones to this kind of like the My cabinet, which is the giant circle with a screen in the middle and you're hitting the buttons around the side. I think it's just the variety is there, and it's just so different from anything you see in regular arcades outside of that country. And I just fell in love with it. I just absolutely thought it was the best stuff, and has now given me a new life goal of like, one day I need to make enough money to where I can buy a My cabinet and have it, you know, in a house, right? Like just have it whenever I want it. Which is harder said than done. I looked into it and I was like, Jesus Christ, the pricing on this is insane, but also like you can't do it properly because it's all built like with online stuff in mind, and so Sega has this entire network for all their online rhythm games, where you have to like pay them like a fee if you're like in the US, I believe, you know, if you're an arcade in the US and you want to import one of these cabinets, you have to pay every year like a $5,000 like to just subscribe to it or whatever. It's insane.
That's wild.
But you know, eventually in like, I don't know, 40 years time, I'll figure this out and I'll own one of these, and then I won't have to play DJ Max Respect instead because I'll have the real thing. But as it stands, I'm playing DJ Max Respect 5, and that's my way of coping. So anyway, That's it. That's the list. That took a while. It took a longer time
long enough podcast here?
Jesus Christ.
It did take longer than expected, but that's all right. It was a good conversation,
that's
I think.
How it goes.
We only got to your number 11, MBZ, as well.
We did. So there's a teaser for what's coming up next. You're going to have to stay tuned.
I forgot. I had a secret number 1 I wanted to mention.
Oh, okay.
My secret number 1, I think you can guess it, NBZ, is The Binding of Isaac Repentance Plus. Now that that has come out, the greatest game of all time just got a really cool free DLC update, online co-op. It's awesome. I'm excited for it to top your list in 2025 when you finally play Isaac.
Look, I'm gonna play Isaac now. I'm legally obligated now. That's in Balatro. I've got to play it. So that's how it works.
No, I know. I think similar to how Video Game Donkey, his running joke of like Super Mario Brothers 2 being his game of the year. That'll be me with Isaac.
Yes,
it's just the game of the year every year.
Yeah, every year, never changes.
Every year.
I think I'm at my journey with roguelikes, because the thing with me in roguelikes, right, was I was like, I don't really like those. That's not for me. And then like slowly over time, I'm like,
I've corrupted your brain.
No, I like that, but I don't like roguelikes, but I like that one. And then it just kept being like that for every game, and I was like, okay, maybe I like roguelikes. maybe they're like my favorite genre now.
I know.
And it's been a weird road there, but I think I am ready to play Isaac at this point in time. Same with Spelunky. I think I need to check out Spelunky.
I mean, I'm sure I could do it at some point, but that's been one a little too intimidating for me in some respects.
Oh wow, okay, that makes me more scared. Okay, interesting. Anyway, shall we just quickly everyone run through their lists to remind people, because it's been 3.5 hours since the beginning, so people might have forgotten. So let's run through and then we can get on out of here. So Matt, you want to count down from 10 to 1 on your list?
Yeah, number 10, Tomb Raider. Number 9, Unpacking. Number 8, Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. Number 7, Papers, Please. Number 6, SteamWorld Build. Number 5, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. Number 4, God of War Ragnarok. Number 3, Before Your Eyes. Number 2, Ape Escape. And number 1, Astrobot Rescue Mission.
Very good. And Devon, same for you?
Yes. Very quickly, I may have this in a slightly different order, because I did it in a different order than I have it written down. But
sure, yeah.
I have Resident Evil 4, both the original and the remake from 2023. Dark Souls 3, Monster Hunter Rise, Power Wash Simulator, Stardew Valley, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, Astrobot, Balatro, Counter-Strike 2, and last but not least, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D Remake.
Very good. My number 20, Birth. My number 19, Fist, Forge and Shadow Torch. 18, Rhythm Sprout. 17, Dragon Quest 4. 16, Donkey Kong King of Swing. 15, Densetsu no Starfy. 14, Attack of the Friday Monsters. 13, After Image. 12, Pony Island. And number 11, DJ Mac Respect 5. So there you go. That's it. That's video games.
What varied lists too? Like we
very
we managed
lists.
to have 30 games that are not like no crossover. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah,
well done, us.
Very good stuff. Yeah, we did a great job. Lovely. Well, thank you both so much for joining me and taking so much time to talk about these video games. That was great fun. Very much enjoyed it. Hopefully you at home did as well. We'll be back soon. Bally will be back soon. Don't worry, he's coming back. And we'll be talking about our Game of the Year stuff. So look forward to the rest of my list, number 10 through 1. It's going to be spicy. It's going to be good. I think we'll do that full-on Game of the Year as well, and see what Nintendo's stuff brought us this year and what we're going to choose. So that's coming up. But yes, thanks, guys. Anything you want to plug, places people can find you on the internet, please go ahead.
I could jump in first. I am at mattlorigan.bsky.social. You know the little bit that's on the end of all the Blue Sky stuff.
Just search Matt Lorigan on Blue Sky. I think
just search Matt Lorigan on Google. You'll find all my stuff.
Yeah, like, that's it. He's killed the rest of them. He's the only one left. So
thank you so much for having me on. I always love the opportunity to just chat about stuff that I've been enjoying.
Fantastic, Devon.
Yeah, you can find, if you like listening to my voice and you like silly JRPGs ranging from the 90s to now, you can find, and actually 80s too, You can find me at Emblemcast. We do a Fire Emblem podcast. We are now in the process. We don't have anything. I don't think we have anything posted yet, but we're working our way through Shadow Dragon next, which I've actually never played. So that'll be interesting. And we're tackling a new mystery after that, so it'll be fun.
Nice, very cool. I need to get back to Shadow Dragon at some point because I really bounced off that game.
If you like,
as a Fire Emblem fan,
if you like characters that look like Play-Doh figures in your RPGs,
oh my god, it's really ugly. It's real ugly.
I know.
But hey, that's how it is. Great, wonderful. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back soon with more video game chat. Until then, a goodbye.